so let's begin. Don't worry, we're not actually waiting 9 minutes. It's a trick.
All right, what is up, guys? How's it going? Hope you're having a very, very good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you're coming from. And we're back for another episode of the Group Up Podcast. A very, very special episode indeed. As we draw to the end of the year, I am with a member of the Overwatch development team, and we're going to have a whole little debrief on the year that's gone by and what's to come as well. So let me introduce my guest, Jared. In fact, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell everyone who you are and what you do on the Overwatch team.
Sure thing.
Before he introduces himself, just want to say thank you very much. Rocket Punches says you're stuck in ad hell. Sorry. I thanked you, but I don't know if you'll hear it in time when the ads end. But I do appreciate the Twitch Prime for 33 months. Thank you, and thank you. I also want to say... what did I want to say? I literally lost my train of thought just as I was about to say it. Ah, you just made it in time. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for resubscribing. Prime rolled over. It'll do that. I've lost my train of thought, yeah.
Hi, I'm Jared Neuss. I'm the executive producer for Overwatch 2. So I do game strategy, team leadership, sort of like where are we going and how are we going to get there type stuff for the team.
Awesome. So you're like in charge of the big decisions.
I remember what I was going to say. SVB being the host for this, I just wanted to qualify. There's a chance, and I don't know because I haven't spoken to him specifically, but knowing how this tends to work, there's a chance that there were handling emails regarding this interview, and he may have been constrained in the questions or follow-ups he was allowed to ask. I don't know if this was agreed upon beforehand regarding the exact questions or general gist of what questions he's going to ask. So if you feel like he didn't probe effectively enough or anything like that, I just want to say, like, I'm sure he did this in goodwill to the best of his abilities, so I hope nobody takes anything wrong there. I think he's a pretty decent interviewer, and if you do feel that way, I'd probably chalk it up to that being the case, that it was more of a pre-designated, these are the constraints of the interview situation. Because getting access to an executive producer on a game as big as Overwatch 2, it's a pretty big deal, and it doesn't happen very often, which is, again, why I wanted to cover this. And again, he's speaking fairly candidly, too, or at least giving the appearance of speaking candidly. Maybe that's kind of his demeanor, and he's got, like, the right language to make it appear that way. But, just wanted to add that one qualifier. I do believe SVB is a host in goodwill. I don't think there's an agenda or anything like that.
Am I right?
Yeah. If there's a thing in the game that you really like or a thing in the game that you really don't like, it's probably my fault, or you can give me credit for it. So yeah, I take a lot of the heat for like anything really. Just fire away at me.
Very brave man, and you're very brave on Twitter as well. Like, Jared will straight up come in and answer people's annoyed threads where they're just like, I am annoyed about the game. Just tag Jared, and they're like, Jared, why is...
That is true. He does do that, and sometimes he says some very, like, oddly out-of-touch things in the replies.
This thing exists, and you very politely, I would not have the patience you do. You very politely actually respond to them, and kudos to you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, it is exhausting, but the thing that I love about it is like, I don't know, like I play games, I watch movies. Like if I had fired some opinion out on the internet about something, and somebody that was involved in making that thing talked to me about it, I would be like geeked out of my mind. So if I can do that for people who play Overwatch, then that's great.
Amazing. Awesome to hear. Okay, so let's get into the discussion then. We're going to talk about loads of things, a real wide-ranging topics. We're going to talk about monetization, PvE, reflecting on the year, the Steam launch, collaborations, and of course what to expect in the year coming up as well. But I thought we'd start with some current affairs, as it were, in Overwatch. Before we get to kind of reflective on the year, I thought we'd just talk about what's happening right now. So my first question to you, Jared, comes about the Mythic skins. Now, there's been a bit of controversy in the Overwatch community about a perceived drop in quality of the Mythic skins. People feel like, especially compared to the early seasons, like the Genji, Kiriko Mythic skins, the last couple ones, the Hanzo, Risa, they've kind of lacked customizability, and they just don't quite have the same oomph as the original one. So how do you guys...
He's maybe understating the degree to which the community is upset about this right now. It's a big deal for a lot of folks. The Mythic skin is the culminating end of every season pass. It's the big prize you get for finishing each battle pass, essentially. It's supposed to be a super decked out, customizable, special edition looking fancy skin. So the first one that they led off with for Genji in Season 1, it had three options for the head, 3 options for the chest, and 3 color schemes with 2 different weapons. And now we're to the point where we're getting 3 color schemes and like 2 different arms for Orisa. The quality in terms of customization has gone drastically down. And what I'm thinking is the case here is it's trying to reset expectations, because the release cadence is they do a new season. It's once every 9 weeks. And so the turnaround with regard to how long it takes for them to produce one mythic skin, well, they've said before in the past that it takes a year in lead time to result in one of those things finishing. That's not just not the artistry to be done in a year. It's the back and forth of it, the meetings, iterations, getting everything right, implementing it into the game, all of that stuff. And I think possibly what's happened here is they've kind of oversold their expectations, given us a bit too much when we come out of the gate. And now we're at the point where we need to rein it in quite a lot. And that feels bad, because if you start off at a certain high point, seeing that reduce each time, and there's been 2 seasons in a row where it's been the least customizable skin, doesn't feel great. So I'll let Jared address that.
I just kind of feel about the mythic skins and what's going on back there.
I don't know if I agree about the oomph factor, but I think the feedback has been really helpful. I mean, something that's interesting to note is with mythic skins, I don't think that there was like sorry, it's not that I don't think, there wasn't like a template for what they would always be. It wasn't like every mythic will have this number of customization options, this number of colors, this blah, 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 blah. Like, when I joined...
He's right, there wasn't a template, but I do believe as a developer you would understand when you're given something, the first time you see it, that first expectation that you make, that first, meeting with that thing, how you take it then is going to be the expectation you have going forward, right? That's just how things work, really. If you give me something and then you give me less of it later, it's going to feel like a reduction. We're not in the development team. We don't get to sit at the boardroom table. We don't get to see what your true internal thoughts are. We just see what ultimately ends up in the game once you're done having all those meetings and seeing it integrated into the game for us. So we don't get to see any of that. We just get the results.
The team, shortly after the game launched, every mythic was kind of its own thing. And
not true. Every mythic was pretty much identical for the first 5 seasons. They followed the template of Genji to the best of their ability, and slowly they started removing things.
And there's a lot that I like about that idea, but like I think what's really clear is that when things change, people will always compare to the thing that came before it, and there's been frustration around it. So, when people say, well, Mythic Orisa has like one thing that you can change and then a bunch of different colors, I'm like, well, yeah, but also like, the alt has like brand new custom VFX, there's a ton of new audio, there's a bunch.
So did the Genji one in Season 1. I don't know why he's using that as an example of something that's changed or that is now better. Every single one of these skins has had a modified voice and a different alt line and a different sound effect for the gun firing. So I don't know why he brings that up as if it's somehow an alternate, like an exchange of value. We didn't shift away from customization and into additional VFX. We just lost customization and had the same amount of VFX. So that's a bit of obfuscation, honestly.
A bunch of voice lines and a bunch of voice modulation. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. So I'm not trying to say that people who are upset are wrong or anything like that. That's not it at all. It's just that one of the things that we're learning is what people are and are not excited about when it comes to mythics. And so seeing the response to Mythic Hanzo, I think, was really interesting because people saw the number.
Mythic Hanzo is the first one that had a tremendously less customizable character to it. And I have to say, as well, they've only offered us ever 3 different color options, and sometimes none of them look great. And I don't know why we can't simply be given either one customizable, RGB color picker option, maybe for like a highlight color if they're really dead set on having a particular look. Or, honestly, the best choice would be literally just allow us to pick all 3 of the highlighted sections on our own. I mean, even if it's like a reduced color palette, but just let us just pick the colors. there's no reason why that would matter to the game itself, because they're willing to allow us to have any color heroes. They don't interfere with the silhouette. It doesn't interfere with the outline of the character, whether it's, ally or enemy. So all of that stuff, like, there's no reason they couldn't implement that if they wanted to give us, the best value and reduce that problem of I didn't feel like I got value for it. Just let us customize it to our abilities then if you don't want to do it. And I know this is not a technical problem that can't be solved. I've gotten into Blender enough to know that it doesn't take a freaking hour to swap a color on something. And I know Blender is not representative of what they're doing, but I know enough about 3D to say that's not something that would be impossible to implement. But sorry, I'm above my station.
Customization options there, and I think there's some frustration before they use the skin. And then after they used the skin, I think they saw kind of what we were going for, and I think the positive response to that since then has been generally pretty high. That skin is sick, in my opinion. Orisa.
The skin looks fine, yeah. I'm not really arguing about it. The skin looks fine. It's just it had so few customization options. That's all. And I don't know that at the end of the day the community was super happy about it. They were just like, well, let's see what the next one looks like, and it was another one with less customization. And honestly, the Orisa skin looks a bit like another skin that's already a legendary from 3 or 4 years ago, that Scarab Beetle one. So I get that it fits with the theme of the Battle Pass, and I'm not really upset about that. I don't even think it looks that bad. But people did feel like it was lacking in terms of creativity and customization, which felt like a kind of a flashpoint in terms of people getting upset.
So I think people have had kind of more mixed feelings about. And so for us, it's about just hearing what people think. If literally the number of customization options is the thing that people are frustrated by, how can we do a little bit better there in the future? And we're already making adjustments to future Mythic skins based on the feedback that we saw kind of before Hanzo released, and then now that we're seeing kind of the response.
That is a fair point, at least. It should be mentioned there is a long lead time, as I already said, and if they want to pivot off of something like the reaction to the Hanzo skin, that was, only a couple months ago, there's not really a way that we would see results from them having a change in mindset this fast. I'm trying to be fair here, but at the same time, I think there are some things that Jared is a bit wishy-washy about, and this is not one of them. I do think that's fair. It does take time to implement change.
Response to Orisa, there are changes in the works. So, I don't know if we'll ever go all in forever on the level of customization that Genji had.
That's a bad sign. I don't know if we'll go all in forever. Do you hear how much hyperbole he just used there as a sort of a obfuscation again? That sounds to me like he's saying we're absolutely moving away from what Genji had, and you better get used to the fact that we're not going to be going back to it. If I were to read between the lines, that's how I took that. It's sort of executive speak for, please distance yourself from this idea, because you're not getting that anymore.
That was a
really
really complicated skin out of the gate
that they then were able to reproduce in terms of quality for the next 5 after that. So doesn't ring true to me, honestly. There was nothing especially exemplary about the Genji one that wasn't also in the ones following it for several seasons. So I don't know why he said that. I really think they're moving away from that level of customization, though, and they're trying to come up with something to make it feel more fleshed out that isn't that customization.
But I know that we can provide players with more customization than we are now.
That was going to be my kind of question. This follow up is that did you kind of set the bar too high almost? Should we expect something more?
Did you see how fast he said yes to that? Did you think you set the bar too high? Yes. I mean, he's grinning at it, but and keep in mind, Jared didn't join the team until a month after Overwatch 2 launched, which means he wasn't there for the initial decision-making process of what mythics were going to look like for the Genji skin. So him having such an over-the-top reaction to saying yes to that means he probably didn't want it to be that customizable to begin with, and all of this time, they have been working through their content pipeline while he says, can we work a bit less on the mythic skins? They're going to buy them anyway. The battle pass at the end doesn't matter that much, or something to that effect. I'm obviously putting words in his mouth, but that's kind of the knock-on of what he could have said there.
On the level of what we've gotten recently, because I guess to try and be fair to you guys, that you might have spent a lot of time on that one Genji mythic because it was going to be the first mythic, and maybe now we've been a bit like we expect that level of things, whereas really the Hanzo restart kind of more in the ilk of, is that what you can logistically make in the time between seasons?
Oh yeah, I don't think it's necessarily that like we only have time for like the level of customization that you'd see in Orisa. I think it's more about these skins take a long time to make. And
Please explain what just happened there. It's not about how much time it takes to make them. I think it's about how much time it takes to make them is essentially what he just said. I genuinely think that was just like a flub, like he didn't mean to say that, but it didn't make any sense.
And so, what you're seeing today has been in development for a long time before we really had feedback about what players liked. And so, I think there's a little bit of a naive idea that like, players will just get that these are all different and they're all customizable in some way and they're all very cool and have a lot of custom.
Nah. There wasn't anything meaningfully different about them between the skins. It was just they have a bunch of different customizable parts. So I don't know what he's talking about. It's not like each one starting at Genji and then changing each season was a whole different idea. They were all identical up until recently, which is the content pipeline running out. Again, I think it's where he started being the executive producer. Add 6 months to that for the content to come through, and then now we're seeing the change.
Like VFX and audio and stuff. And now what we're seeing is more people wanting like number of customization options, which I get. But do I think we came out of the gate a little bit hard? Yeah, there's a lot in a skin like that. And the thing about the Overwatch team that is, I don't know if the community believes, but is 100% true, is that left to their own devices, everyone on the team will always try to one up the thing that they just did. They'll always try to go a little bit harder and do
This is super weird.
a little bit more. And so it's about like, hey, let's find that balance of it's always amazing, but also like, you don't have 7,000 customization options 3 years from now. It's
again, absolute crazy straw man hyperbole, saying, so we don't have 7,000 customization options. Nobody's saying there should be 7,000. They're saying 9. 3 of 3 things, essentially. Or even 8 if you have 2 weapons and then 2 color sets and 2 body types or something, or 3 body types. 7,000 is a little bit over the top. So the amount that he wants to readjust the Overton window about this concept says to me he is very much against customization in the Mythics and thinks it's a waste of time.
It's right. That's the kind of balance we're trying to find.
No power creep in the customization, then, basically, is what we're saying.
I try a lot because I want people to be able to like go home at a normal hour. And
great. I mean, yes, obviously you should want that. But can we not achieve both having enough content and them going home at a normal hour? I mean, you're a massively funded AAA dev with so many resources, right? I'm a little bit confused about this. And again, it's not like we're asking for the moon here. It's like it's one different weapon model, or sorry, two different weapon models, 3 body types, and some different color schemes or a different hat. It's like a few models. I thought they'd have the bandwidth to be able to absorb that once each 9 weeks. But maybe it's not as simple as I'm making it out to be. Maybe it's that all of the coordinating between these different parts and the different artists that need to make them, it's simply not feasible to get as many people to work together in as short a time as is needed to do the turnaround, have all the meetings they need to have about getting these things, approved and implemented as it sounds like it would be. I don't know. I guess I'd need to see more about their internal process to know more about if that's weird or not.
Have a life.
I mean, yeah, kudos to you for valuing that as a developer. That's severely underrated, but that's not for this podcast to talk about. I mean, yeah.
And I absolutely am not trying to downplay, by the way, that they treat their workers well. That is absolutely the most important thing. I just don't think these two things are in conflict here, as someone on the outside with an uninformed opinion.
So that's good to know. You should note that Overwatch players are going to be competitive as well. As the team are competitive, people are going to be like, well, my favorite character Hanzo didn't get 8 options, but Genji did. 100%. So I think
That's a very good point as well. Yeah, people are competitive about it, and one person will say my mythic's better than their mythic, and it's like, didn't need to be a thing, really.
I think you guys have created a bit of a problem for yourself there.
I think we underestimated that for sure. Like as a person who plays a lot more Orisa than Genji or Hanzo, I like the skin, but I totally get where people are coming from. It's like, oh well, I could swap out all these different things before, and now I can only change these things. Like, why is that? And so it's that feedback is like, it's super helpful, and just understanding where our players are at is like, we have to know so that we can do better in the future.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that one. Well, speaking on continuing the theme of like monetization and right.
To what you said, Rocket Punches, as far as I know, Team 4 has always been fine. For the most part, there really hasn't been most of the systemic issues that Blizzard as a whole have suffered from, other than Bobby Kotick interfering with them on a personal level, telling them to make X system for the game, and then coming back and saying, I don't want that now, and just kind of wasting their time and budgeting and manpower and stuff. Like, I don't think they've had abuse on the same level as the rest of Blizzard. Team 4 has kind of been its own thing. I can't speak to it at an intimate level, obviously, but everything I've taken in from the countless hours of content I've heard about, interviews with developers, and everyone that I've seen talk in their own forums, I really didn't get the impression that they were suffering in the same way as the rest of the company.
Now, you guys have obviously announced Winter Wonderland and this new Winter Fair event pass. Now, obviously, there's great elements of it, but I'm here to address complaints. I'm going to ask you the negative parts. So a lot of people feel like a little bit hard done by when you look.
I have to give Jared one thing. He takes the punches fairly well throughout this. There's a number of things that are quite negative to bring up. And what really would have made this difficult is if Jared was like really defensive or standoffish about it. And I'll give him credit. Like, he mostly doesn't get that way at all. And I'm pretty surprised by that, because I think a lot of people would be in that position. But no, he mostly just answers things pretty straightforward. Well, answers them in corporate straightforwardness, which is kind of to say obfuscates and dances around things. But, it could be worse. It wasn't awkward anyway.
Look at how you can unlock things in the premium pass that you pay for, which is that you can't actually get all the skins that you want, even if you pay for the premium pass and grind all the tickets. It's a max of 480, and each of the legendary skins costs 160, and then there's 3 that cost 90 each. So just doing the math, you can't get them all. And on top of that, there's other cosmetics you can't get as well. So
for context, this season they're trying something unique. There is a second battle pass for the Winter Wonderland event, which just launched, somebody said an hour ago or so. I think it was at 7. I'm in GMT, so 7 p.m. for me. The thing is with this, you can either play in the free track, or you can pay for the premium track, which is an additional $5 to the battle pass cost, which is $10 for each season. So essentially their monetization is every season, which is 9 weeks, you can pay $10 or optionally opt for bigger, better packages of the premium battle pass, which skip tiers and give you extra skins and currency and all other weird little bundle weird stuff, cosmetic stuff. And this season, though, we have the option to pay an extra $5 to get a premium track of holiday-specific skins, one of which is not a holiday-specific skin, which is very odd. But yeah, you can't get all of the skins, even if you pay for them, which is a bit odd. And so we're going to talk about that now.
What was behind the decision? Like, why can't we unlock everything if we've paid for the Winter Pass?
Yeah, this is one that, like, I'll be totally honest, like, the responses kind of surprised me.
Would it surprise you, though, that if people paid for this thing, they would think they could get all the things in it? Coming from, and maybe Jared isn't familiar, but coming from the prior boxed retail version of Overwatch, where literally every skin was earnable, I don't want to say for free. I mean, you didn't pay more for it, but you paid for the game initially, which was a one-time $40 purchase, or you could get the Legendary Edition, which was $60 back in freaking 2016. So I'm not arguing, good value, but the degree to which they have overly monetized the skins is, like, mind-boggling to me. They want $20 for most of the premium legendary skins, and they offer sometimes about 10 of them per season. So you do the math there, it gets a little nutty a little fast. And then they've had controversies about why are they charging $40 for the premium battle pass to get these, time limited full mode exclusive skins, the one Diablo crossover skin with Moira and Pharah. So all of this just kind of culminates in this feeling of like, what do you get for playing the game? How do you honor the time we're spending as fans of this game at all? And so the answer is like, you might get one skin every 5 months or something. At least you get something, but it feels terrible compared to what it used to. And I don't think that Jared takes into account the absolute morale downgrade of not really getting anything most of the time for playing the game. They're like, well, you can just play it for free. It's a free-to-play game. That constantly comes up. But you still want to feel like you're kind of looped in. Not like absolutely everything you do has a paywall.
It's understandable when you break it down like that. I'm like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. But like, step back and just think about our goals with it for a second. Our goals were, when you play an event in Overwatch, usually it's like, play a bunch of games, get a skin at the end. Cool, I'm moving on with my life.
This is the way it was for quite a while. There was about 2 or 3 years where they would do a sort of a random event would pop up during Overwatch 1. If you won 9 games, you would get a premium skin of some kind. I don't remember. There were epics or legendaries. I think it varied. But they would just kind of give you a free skin for playing a few games. It was like maybe an hour time commitment sometimes, and you get a skin. Now they would charge $20 for that skin.
And what we wanted was for players to have more choice. And so it's like, well, how do we give you more choice? If it's, at the end you get to pick from one of 3 things or whatever. And so the goal here was like, what if an event was still, had a similar structure to what we have today, but you could pick the thing you got at the end. That's cool. And then it's like, well, what if we could give you like a menu of options to pick from, and then you could pick from some number of things and decide what you want. So if it's like, oh, I want these 2 skins and these other things, great. Then I got the stuff that I wanted. I'm happier because I got more agency over what I was able to get than in a normal event. That was kind of like the goal and where we started from. And so kind of implicit to that is this idea that like there's a menu of options. When you go to a restaurant, you don't say, give me everything on the menu. You'll be like, I want these 2 things or these 3 things because that's what I'm paying for.
That's just a weird metaphor.
And so I think we were probably a little bit misguided in just thinking like, oh, everyone will be totally cool with this, right? Because like obviously you wouldn't be able to get all of these things for $5 in the game.
Obviously. Based on our unbelievable monetized skins, you wouldn't... We're supposed to read their minds about what they expect, like, their Overton window for costs to be. We're supposed to go, okay, because we normally have to pay $20+ for each skin. The fact that they would offer us 3 of them for $5, that's such a good value that we have to just accommodate that now. What they're not taking into account, and I think the major difference in why people feel so scorned a lot of the time regarding this transition from the first game to the sequel, is they no longer take into account the time spent playing the game as a sort of commodity. And I do think this is an important thing to take into account. Goodwill is a commodity, and time played is a commodity. Every time you're playing Overwatch, you're not playing Valorant. Every time you're talking about how much you like Overwatch, you're not talking about how much you like Apex Legends. You might bring in a friend. These are sort of natural ways to build a community, rather than get everybody in and then take as much money from them as you can and leave them kind of pissed off all the time. And so we don't feel respected as a community anymore because they don't care about how much time we play the game. We're paying them money to then have to grind for skins. That feels terrible. Every battle pass we get, everyone gets the same skins at the same time. There's no big, I got this cool thing. Look at me, I got this cool thing. It's, I paid $25 and I got this thing that anyone could have. That doesn't feel as good. It's just as simple as that. And if you then add that they don't care that you spend hours grinding, it's just about how much you paid. And I know that's intrinsically how free-to-play works now. But I have never enjoyed the live service model. I never wanted Overwatch to go to live service. And I don't think it necessarily suits the game, especially with the paywall regarding putting heroes in the battle pass. And they're going to talk about that soon, too. It's all felt really off.
That's like us giving more away than I think we could reasonably do.
That's giving more away than we could reasonably do. Who said that? Was that Jared that said that, or was that Bobby?
But the way that we framed it was like, we put it all out there. You can't get everything, and so people are frustrated by that, which I get. So for us, the learnings from this are like, do we want to do one of these again? If so, do we want to do it this way? If we do it in a different way, should we just do like a linear, like event pass or something like that, where like you do get everything just for paying for it, but there's no choice really. It's just about like how you grind it out.
I don't know why he's ignoring the very clear option here of just allow us to have enough points to get all the things in the pass. Like, why does it have to become, we took a lesson from this and we absorbed knowledge from this and we had to talk about it and have 50 meetings? Could you not just give us the amount of currency necessary to get the things in the pass? Like now, could you just change the numbers so they work correctly in the way that we want it to? Why can't you do that? Well, because it's giving away too much. And there lies the issue.
I don't know.
Right.
The last thing I'll say is like, we get a lot of feedback before people experience a thing, and then we get a lot of feedback after people experience a thing. Sometimes that feedback is the same. Sometimes it's not. And so, we'll put the event out. We'll see how people like it once they play it and get the stuff, and then we'll make our final decision then. But at least knowing that people were frustrated by this like inability to get everything that was part of the menu is really helpful for us going forward.
I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but why do you need to have feedback both before and after this? Why could you not simply just think about it a bit? I know it's not that serious, like in terms of the problems of the world, but this seems like something you shouldn't need this much feedback about. To just know you're dealing with a player base that's perpetually aggrieved and frustrated with your decision-making process. So spend a little of that goodwill currency, or build some of it rather, by giving away some things that make us feel like we care or are cared about as an audience. I don't know why that's so hard to just understand. We need a little bit of encouragement to feel like you care. I know you don't have to care, and you won't care. It's just about giving us the illusion that you care. And that maybe there's something like this that might happen again in the future.
Right. I think from what I've seen from the player complaints, it's kind of, you're right in that purely monetarily, for 500 credits, you're getting a legendary skin, which is cheaper than on par. But I think it's that play time mixed into it, which is making players feel like they're kind of losing out on something because they've paid for the pass, but then they're also grinding in the game, and so they're grinding to get these tickets, but then they can't actually get everything that's on.
I want to add one more point, which I don't think SVB actually mentions, and that's that these are also time-gated tickets. So essentially how it works is you pay $5 up front to get the premium winter event pass, and then you're only allowed X tickets per week for 3 weeks. So that means you're FOMO'd in 2 different ways, while also paying for it, while also paying within a second battle pass. Is that not, like, a bit deranged? It shouldn't be a goddamn job to have to play Overwatch just to get some freaking skins. You know, the fact that you've got to actually grind the game 3 different times during 3 weeks to be able to get the skins you essentially purchased. That's why I'm so frustrated, because it's like they just don't take into account the time played at all.
Offer. So it is perhaps unintentionally reminiscent of like one of those fairground things where you're like, oh, actually, I can't get all the cool toys at the top. I can only get like a few of the medium ones.
That's exactly right, SVB. That's exactly the best way to say it. It is like a fairground game, because it is. It's a rigged fairground game. Essentially, it is rigged. It's just through time and manipulation. That's all.
Yeah, totally. And like, this is one of those areas where I think the Overwatch.
It's weird that he laughs that off, honestly.
Every game community is like unique, right? They all have their own characteristics. There's stuff that is like totally normal and fine in some communities and like complete anathema to other communities. And this is one where, like, we thought the model was generous, but I still do think the model is pretty generous.
It's not. It's not generous at all. It's terrible. He's out of freaking reality to say that he thinks the model is generous. you can generate 60 coins per week at most with the weekly challenges. One battle pass costs 1,000 coins. Skins for individual characters cost something like 2,100 coins. It will take you half a year to buy one single skin, or every other season you can buy the battle pass if you complete absolutely every single challenge. It's not generous. It doesn't respect the player's time. It doesn't feel rewarding. It feels bad in every way, really. And it's insulting that he thinks it's generous.
Like, you're able to get 4 skins for $5. Like that's way better than you can do normally for just a normal skin in the shop.
They're like utterly convinced that skins have this like true value that they've decided to ascribe to it. That because they said this normally costs X, that is what it truly costs. No, it costs whatever the market is willing to pay for it. And as long as they bluster about how much value is in these things, they can just keep pretending that that's actually real. It's like a weird NFT thing.
But we have to listen to what is unique about the Overwatch community, and people kind of being frustrated by that is really helpful for us. So.
And just to confirm, can you get the skins afterwards? Like the skins that if you can't get all of them by playing, will they arrive in the shop later?
I wish I knew the answer to this question, and I don't know the shops. So I can't. The things that it's like, usually you can get the stuff in the hero gallery, and then often we'll run stuff in the shop after it runs for the first time. I don't remember our exact plans for this one. I have to be totally honest.
It won't be. They time gate everything, really. Very likely it'll be a year before you see those skins again, if ever. And weirdly, one of the skins is a really old Widowmaker skin that was a StarCraft crossover event. I want to say it was from like 2017 or 18. And they just chose to put that into the Winter Wonderland one for some reason. It's like, it has nothing to do with winter. And it's quite an old skin, and they're saying it has the highest value out of all of them. Up there with the Christmas Reinhardt skin. It's very odd. Like, I don't know why that one was chosen, and it's never been offered for sale or any other way to get it before other than this event, so I guess they're leaning on it to establish that rarity value.
It's the end of the year, and like my brain is mush from 2023.
No worries. No, I understand as a creator when it's like I might dedicate my life to this game, but it doesn't mean I have the answer to every single intricate nuance.
I believe him in a way that probably this is something he just forgot, but I also think it's weird. It kind of stretches my imagination to believe that he wouldn't know this. It doesn't matter, but I just think he's trying not to have to answer a hard question with a no here, is what that came down to, really.
Of the thing, so okay, totally understand. Okay, so the next question was probably the final one on specific monetization things. It's one that I'm kind of more personally interested in as well, which is about the hero paywalling, or let's say the hero potential paywalling. You can paywall them, but when you and I
I've never heard that term before. By the way, that's amazing.
Right.
So to give context to this topic, what he's talking about here is every time there's a new hero, which is every other season, they put it in the battle pass. So essentially you can either grind the game for 45 levels, and it used to be higher, I think it was 65, but they reduced it to 45 as a sort of compromise to unlock that hero, or you can pay for the battle pass, that $10 fee up front to get the hero unlocked immediately. And what that means is unless you grind up to level 45, which usually takes about 2 weeks if you're playing, pretty regularly, there will be a point in time for that about 2 weeks or so where you don't have that hero and everyone else does. And in a game like Overwatch, where there's constant counter-swapping, whatever the new hero is typically quite meta. I mean, they play them constantly because it's the new hero. Everyone wants to get their time in on it. And not having that hero, especially when it was someone like Kiriko, a healer that has the ability to make you invulnerable for a moment, their powers can really swing the game. So not having that as an option to instantly be able to play as that character when it's introduced has created as he said, a play wall where you have to grind the game or you have to pay them money. It feels bad. They've known it felt bad since Season 1. They haven't changed it. It's been a year.
Right, so you can of course play and unlock them, but you can also buy them, and they're in the premium battle pass. And about a year ago, when John, you and I had a call here, we kind of were talking about, that was when you had just roughly introduced the idea. The community was obviously very skeptical of it. And a lot of the messaging around the time.
Oh yeah, Perot, he just meant he's never heard the exact phrasing play wall. He knows about paywalls. He just hasn't heard someone say that term exactly before. I'm 100% sure he knew what he was referring to, though.
Was something along the lines that, look, we recognize that heroes are like our best product, the thing that people want to say the most, so we got to monetize them, which I think fair observers.
And yes, Blizzard did say specifically they are acutely aware that heroes are the most lucrative prospect for them when it comes to how to monetize the game. They outwardly said this. I mean, perhaps shouldn't have said this in an interview, but and it wasn't Jared. I can't remember. He just said who it was. Actually admitted that in an interview that they know this is the thing they want to lean on for leverage, and so they know they have to include it in the battle pass to sell the battle pass. That's why they've done that, even at the behest of the game becoming awkwardly skewed. Essentially leveraging gameplay for money.
Will say, okay, reasonable, you guys have to monetize your game. But another aspect of that was that this messaging around Overwatch 2's launch had a lot to do with, well, counterpicking. We don't want it to really be a thing. We don't want hard counters to be a thing in our game. And we've looked at the player behavior, and players kind of gravitate to a few heroes, and they like to play those heroes. So we want to let them play those heroes and kind of live out their preferred experience of Overwatch 2.
That's great framing, and he's correct. They did make that into the messaging, that they didn't particularly think counterpicking was going to be as big of a thing going forward, so that's why they were able to justify paywalling the heroes in that way.
We've kind of moved to an area now where, counter-swapping, counterpicking is a real thing in Overwatch. You guys acknowledged this in your last dev blog. And it kind of creates this problem where your initial marketing or messaging, I should say, that we're paywalling the heroes because we think people will get the ones they want. We're now in a situation where people will quite frequently need to swap to a hero that they don't have access to. And we're creating a potential pay-to-win advantage here, where if you don't have a certain hero, your team is requiring this chain of counter swaps, specifically on like a tank role or something, you're kind of at a tangible disadvantage now. So yeah. I was curious as to how you guys address this, because I personally am quite unhappy with it, but I'm open to hearing what you guys what your thoughts on it are.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on it. The not to throw shade at past us, I think it was pretty naive to assume that in a game where you're making heroes that are distinct from each other, that you could avoid counter swapping in that way, especially because think about our game as a hero based game compared to others. Like, part of what makes Overwatch special, in my opinion, is that not only do the heroes bring life to the world and everything else, but they have really sharp edges. And what I mean by that is they have very unique gameplay kits that are not kind of homogenous with a 5% difference. They are wildly distinct from each other. So look at something look at the launch roster of heroes in Overwatch compared to the roster of heroes today, and how many new mechanics have been added. Wrecking Ball exists. That's crazy compared to other kits in the everything is just what makes them special is that they have these pretty crazy abilities that are unique to them. And so to make heroes like that and not expect that you would end up in a situation where as your roster grows to 40, 50, 60 heroes that you would then end up with some hard counters, I think was naive. And
I actually completely agree with Jared on this one, and I'm pretty sure what happened here is he was brought in on his role after these decisions were made and didn't agree with them, and is now potentially trying to undo them, and is trying to sort of do it in a diplomatic way without it feeling like he's just asserting himself over the team. And well, I don't know where the original decisions came from, but it definitely sounds like he's at a complete roadblock against it. It's not what he wanted to do. I agree, though. They shouldn't have ever put them in the battle pass. They shouldn't have paywalled the heroes, and they shouldn't have emphasized that only playing one-trick heroes is the way to go. I understand why they did say that at first, but it just felt like a response to kind of damage control after they had announced battle passes working the way they did. And this, I have to say, this whole Team 4 has been fragmented to hell. There was a massive exodus of talent from the team in the year prior to Overwatch 2 coming out. They've changed game directors, they've changed methodologies, they've changed outlooks, they've changed the scope of the game, they've changed what they wanted to emphasize within the game. how balance works. Like, every single possible decision about the identity of the game has changed in the last 2 years. They've lost so many people from the team and hired in new people who have their own thoughts and their own opinions, that this is all sort of in flux. Overwatch has become a ship of Theseus and is forming its own identity now, again, possibly for the third time.
And you're seeing that in the game today, like you just said. So take that as this initial goal that I don't think we're going to be able to succeed on. There will always be some number of counters in the game because that's how it's going to work. And then look at sort of like, okay, so take that away, and where are you? Would I like for every single player to be able to experience a hero the day that a season drops? Yes. Do I think that we will get there? Yes, I do think that we will get there, and we're actively working towards it right now.
Now, that quote that he just gave, that they're working to get there for every player to be able to have a new hero when it drops, has been kind of running around on social media as he just announced that heroes are leaving the battle pass. I don't know. I feel like that's being overly optimistic to read that far into what he just said. I'd like to believe that, but over and over and over again, we've had it demonstrated that the way they communicate to the audience is not really in line with the actions of what we see followed through with ultimately in the game. So the cynic in me says, maybe there's another way, but I don't know if it'll be as simple as they're just going to give everyone the heroes, with no catch. I don't know how that could be subverted, though, but I'm just saying I don't really believe that at face value.
I talk about the details. No, I can't. But I recognize that it's an issue, and it's something that we do want to address in the game, because we're not actively hitting that first goal. Part of it is also us just making sure that we're balancing that, we're free to play with fairness. So it's yes, obviously you can earn every hero. You don't have to buy them. But like you said, there's this period of time then where does a team have a competitive advantage? That's one of the reasons why we want to change our model going forward, because it doesn't feel great in a game like this that's so dependent on heroes to hold people back.
That's actually, that's a very surprising and awesome response. So just to clarify, you're saying that, look, in the future, you kind of want to make it so that everyone can access new heroes on the launch of a season.
That is the goal, yes.
If that ultimately ends up being true, that'll probably be the best bit of news to come from this. Honestly, that could just be an obvious objective positive, and another change in philosophy coming from the team, really. So I hope that turns out to be true. Fingers crossed.
It is the goal. Okay, I won't pin you to a specific commitment, but okay, it's good to know that is your goal. Any thoughts for returning players? Because obviously the problem, that's great for current players, but there is a potential problem, especially the longer the game goes on, that when you haven't played for a few seasons, you come back and the heroes are locked out, and it does actually take a little bit of time to get them, 35 wins and stuff.
Props to SVB for asking this, because actually I would have been probably fixated on the last thing he said and not remembered to say that. Because the other factor about this is not just the 2 weeks leading into a new season, but if you don't play for a while, every other season you miss is another challenge you've got to complete, and challenge just means you've got to grind a bunch of games to now unlock heroes that you've lost, essentially, that you've missed unlocking during their current season. So that could mean up to 5 heroes worth, or however long you don't play the game, I guess. And over a long period of time, as he says, that will take a substantial amount of time. So what are we going to do about that?
It takes a while to get them, and that, again, brings us back to this competitive disadvantage.
Yeah, I think that's the exact kind of thing that we'll be looking at. In addition to the way that the battle pass works, we'll be looking at then how do I go back and acquire the heroes that have come out since I've been out of the game. I think that there will always be something there, just so that we have some interesting sort of I always worry about a situation where you put someone in front of a game and there's 50 heroes for them to pick from, 60 heroes, 70 heroes for them to pick from. And it's I don't even know where to start or how to get back into it. So there's always this kind of balance between easing people back into something or easing new players into something, and giving people the freedom to just do whatever they want. Because you might not believe it, but sometimes when you give people access to literally everything all at once, they'll get overwhelmed and then churn out really fast.
Do you think that the reason they haven't given everyone access to everything at once is because they'll churn out really fast because they'll be overwhelmed with option paralysis? Or do you think it was more than likely that presented a really good option to monetize? I mean, I'm trying to be reasonable here, but what he just said seems so optimistically like we pulled the wool over your eyes. It just is sort of rude. Like, we all know the situation. It's not like we're on the same side here. We're the ones being monetized too. But there's another aspect to it. Let me let him keep talking.
Because it's like, I don't even know where to begin with this, which is why tutorials usually kind of like ease you into mechanics or to different concepts. And so I don't know exactly what we'll do with returning players acquiring those heroes when they come back, but that is something that we want to like find a better balance for, in terms of like, yeah, there's some time spent kind of like easing yourself back into the game, playing different things, but then also like you'll have the optionality to swap into something if your team needs it.
So the thing that I think was really a massive missed opportunity to talk about here, I'm not sure who should have brought this up, I guess, but they still haven't addressed the lack of tutorial in the game. Now that we're over a year past the game being launched, we still have the same stupid, idiotic soldier running around basic tutorial about this game, and there's no way to actually learn within the constraints of the game other than to simply play it either versus bots or get thrashed online. They have never created an individual hero-specific tutorial for each character, and that just seems like the most obvious thing to ever do. I don't know why they would expect people to not have this. Like, why would this not have been in the plans already? You can learn Soldier, though, and you can learn how payloads work and talk to Tracer for a minute, and then in you go. So if it's truly a problem for you that new players are going to be overwhelmed, I don't know, maybe add a tutorial to the game.
Right, because that is a balance that I totally understand you have to make, because on the one hand, as you said, it's very overwhelming. Like, I can speak from my experiences of trying to learn MOBAs and League of Legends, for example. You kind of get in there and there's
140
like
plus champions. Yeah.
Right, and you have no idea. You're like, well, I'm not even going to touch like 10% of these. I'm going to touch like 4 or 5. But then on the other hand, obviously, as we've said, if Overwatch is different in the sense that it's swapping in the middle of the game. So you're naturally going through larger sections of the roster. And again, as we've said, if needing to pick one thing at a certain point in time is a competitive advantage, then obviously that's something you guys have to navigate, right?
Sorry to keep harping on the same point, but I just realized there was literally a premise they could have used that they did add to the game, and that's in the form of the hero mastery thing they're doing. Essentially, every season or so, they're adding about 3 to 5 more heroes to the hero mastery courses, which are essentially time trial. You collect coins and navigate sort of like a VR mission, usually a few maps each for each hero, and they're supposed to play to the strengths of those heroes. They essentially could have created a situation where that specific hero mastery thing was simply a tutorial that led into, and here's the advanced, harder stuff later on. Oh, Lynn's just added a Christmas hat to Floppa. Very nice.
You think it's too big?
No, I think it's lovely. Thank you. Very good.
I'm gonna add the white clothes later.
Finale says hi.
Hi.
So yeah, that's my my thought regarding that. They actually did have the opportunity to make hero-specific tutorials in the form of hero mastery, and instead made it into just sort of a time trial, arcade mode that doesn't really teach you anything. It plays up some of the things you would already need to know about the specific techs and quirks of each character to be able to achieve a good time on them. But it doesn't teach you how to get that stuff done, which I think is just silly. Like, that was your way out without having to make a tutorial mode for every individual character. And even still, the hero mastery courses are coming out at a very slow drip feed. I was hoping that when they dropped this feature, it was going to be all of them. But you got, like, I don't know, three heroes came out the first week, and then, like, a few weeks later, there were 2 more added. And then a season later, they're adding another 3. So it's not even, like, a super high priority anyway. But at least it would have been something.
Totally. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, I worked
Thanks,
on
Jared.
and played League for many years. And like, if you look at my actual champ mastery in that game, there's like 6 champs that I play a lot, and there's 140 plus that I just haven't really touched. And it's just, it can be overwhelming, right? So Some people are totally fine with that. People who are like ultra hardcore, latch onto stuff really fast. Like we don't want to hold them back any more than is necessary. But like we also need to protect people from this idea that like, oh my God, I have to understand 40 plus things today. Like that's a lot.
Genuine question. Did you feel overwhelmed when you started playing Overwatch about all that? Did you feel like you had to learn every character in the game the first time you played it? Or because I mean, I can only go off of my own experience. Yes, I didn't know a lot about the game, and obviously I knew so little that I struggled for a while. But I also didn't feel like I had to learn everything right away either. I was fine with just kind of locking Reaper and running into the fight for a while until I kind of started to learn what I was doing wrong. The closest thing that I guess they had for a very early way to guide player behavior at the start of the game, and that was back in 2016, I recall looking through the hero roster and looking at their difficulty stars and going, well, this one might be okay for me because it's a 1-star difficulty, right? It's a very simple, super abstracted guideline, I guess, to work with. And so what they do now for new players as their onboarding works for Overwatch 2 is they lock almost the whole roster out from being playable. And one of the first heroes that you do unlock, and you just unlock them by playing X games. I think it's like you get a hero at 10 and 20 and 30 and 50, and it just kind of goes up from there. One of the first heroes they unlock for you after a new account is opened is Genji, which I find that so weird, because not only is it not really... Genji's not a great hero for a new player at all in the first place, but he also doesn't really function well in terms of countering things. So you're sort of missing a lot of the tools you might need to be able to play the game effectively, and the one that they give you is just sort of this flashy, annoying, potentially like not very helpful hero that you're going to play very badly when you don't understand. And I feel like they did that because Smurfs would want Genji fast. Call me really cynical, but like most Smurfs play Doomfist and Genji, so I don't know. Oh, Soldier's unlocked by default, but just Genji's one of the first ones unlocked after being locked, is what I meant. I don't have the list in front of me, but there's... that was probably the most egregious choice about how to unlock them in what order. Anyway, next.
Right. Although, the flip side is obviously there's the Dota approach as well, which is like, they have all the heroes, but obviously maybe that's like a different vision for the game. Maybe they're a bit more hard.
I'd say Tracer is the face of Overwatch, but I don't know if it's as clear-cut as that anymore. Genji is the skin bank of Overwatch, and I'd say Kiriko as well at this point, and Mercy maybe.
Hardcore in that way. But okay.
I would argue that Dota's a little more hardcore than Overwatch in terms of mechanics. It's a pretty hardcore game, yeah.
That's fair. That's totally understandable. Okay, so we're going to move on now from monetization to quick play, because this is something that has been another contentious point recently, one that personally caught me by surprise, actually, which is you guys...
By the way, I'm not a Mercy hater. I know a lot of people get really weird about Mercy. I think she's a perfectly viable character and has an extremely high skill ceiling that most people don't acknowledge, and I don't really know why they're such dicks about it, to be honest. There's a lot of game sense required to be a Mercy player, and you can do a lot of things that you wouldn't be able to do if you're busy with mechanical stuff, which is not to say that you don't have mechanical stuff as Mercy, because the movement tech for her is pretty nuts. In fact, people right now barely ever touch the ground anymore when I see them playing in Masters and stuff. They just freaking fly for the whole game. Like, they just constantly fly. And I don't even mean with Valkyrie.
Use a lot of quick play lever penalties now. So like there's a timeout if you leave 4 out of your last 20 and 6 out of your last 20 games. It increases. So firstly, just your guys' note on these on the penalties itself, and I want to ask a couple more questions about quick play itself.
This is a new thing they've introduced as of this most recent season. I think it's this most recent season. If not this one, it was the last one, but I forget now. That you, out of the last 20 games you've played, if you leave 4 of them in one quick play session, out of your last 20 games of quick play, if you leave 4 games, you start getting penalties. and then it goes up, as he said, from 6 and on. So the reason this is contentious is because people say, well, quick play is just for fooling around and casual fun and shouldn't be taken that seriously. And, you shouldn't ever be penalized for not having the want to commit to a quick play game. I've disagreed with that. And actually, funny enough, I completely agree with Jared's take here, but let's hear it.
But just on the penalties, like, what is the vision? And there seems to be a lot of negative feedback. Are you okay with it for the wider ecosystem of quick play?
Yeah, I have like a very specific viewpoint on this, which is I am extremely okay with it. Like I think the increased penalties are critical to the success of the game going forward. So I understand the like frustration that some people have with it, but um, Overwatch is a team sport. Like it is more than a lot of other games. Like this isn't a game that has super high solo carry potential.
This isn't a game. There's just something about the way he said that. It felt like he was. This isn't a game,
right? Like in a game with power creep as part of the core loop, like at the end of the game, in a MOBA, if your top laner is like wildly out of control, then like you can just steamroll the other team, and every individual person matters a little bit less, in some of those games. But in Overwatch,
what also makes games get steamrolly is when one tank is in plat and the other one is in GM. And the match is completely thrown as a result of one team member being exponentially more skillful than the other. And I'm not even blaming the one that's lower rank. I'm blaming the matchmaking for putting those people against each other. It doesn't matter how skillful you are in the rest of your team. You can't beat a 3 rank higher tank. It's just not going to happen.
Overwatch, solo carrying is like pretty tough. And if somebody leaves, like the potential impact to the overall game is huge. And I'm like a big basketball nerd, so I tend to think about this in terms of like if you're playing a pickup game at the park or whatever. And if you get these 10 people together, you finally get a game going, you're halfway through it, and then somebody like literally just walks off the court and walks onto some other court and starts playing with them, and then you're all sort of like, well, what do we do now? That sucks. That sucks for those 9 people. And sometimes it ends up working out better. Like that person had a negative attitude, somebody comes in, and I've lost track of the number of times.
The way it always works for me is every time I get a pretty decent game going, it looks like we're gonna win easily. 2 or 3 people from the enemy team leave, and then a bunch of Masters players end up filling in, and then we get rolled in retaliation. And then the other response to quick play penalties has been a lot of folks now, instead of leaving the game, they'll either start throwing or they'll simply stand still. And that's not really solving the problem either, because now you just have, teammates that are not even playing even though they're there. But it's not to say that it would have worked out better the other way, because I've also had quick play games where people leave on our team that are never replaced for the rest of the game, sometimes for multiple minutes. They just don't pull in another player for some reason. I don't know why that happens.
Times that then we've turned it around and won the game, but like it is not a good experience, and like what we really want is to acknowledge the fact that life happens. And so if I have 2 kids, like sometimes they'll be in the other room and they'll throw up or spill something on the floor, or somebody delivers a package, like that happens. And so if you need to leave every once in a while, it's okay. But like if you're the kind of person, and we saw this a lot, where you were leaving the majority of your matches at some point, like we had people that are like 90+% leaving matches at the end, in the middle, whenever they felt like it. That
I
just
believe
creates
that.
this like wave of badness for everybody else trying to play the game, right? And so like what I want to do is ensure that people who have that sort of like more selfish take on, well, I can just dip whatever because who cares, like those people end up not being able to do what they want in the same way that they can now. And that the people who actually care and are like trying to work through it with their team, who are trying to win, who are like just in this game to have fun because they can only play it for an hour a night and they're just home from work or whatever, like I want them to have a good time. And if people can just dip, that is not allowing them to have a good time. So I feel strongly that we need penalties. I don't think that we're exactly where they need to be. I think that that's going to be something we work on over the course of the next few seasons. But the immediate impact that those changes had was incredible. Like it was a massive change in our lever rates, and so I think it's just going to be net better for everybody. So I understand the frustration, but like I feel really strongly this is the right way to go.
I mostly agree. Yeah, it's actually there needs to be something to keep people in the game. It sucks that people throw, I don't really know how. Like, all you can do is report them and hope that they get some enforcement on their account. But I agree. Yeah, despite all of the whining on Reddit about this and how many people seem to be frustrated, as he'll go on to explain later, Jared believes that quick play and comp are both core to the experience of Overwatch, and they don't actually believe that quick play is casual to the degree that you shouldn't commit your time to playing through the whole game, which is often cited as, quote, it's just quick play in chat whenever people just want to do whatever they want to do selfishly. So, yeah, I guess this is a decision I pretty much agree with, and I guess I'm glad that it happened. It's just, it's gotten so much anger out of the community because people really like to be able to play the game completely on their terms and pretend no one else exists. For it being a team play cooperative game, you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't if you play it, how many people treat it like a solo experience or is specifically insular to whatever group that they tend to queue in with. I tend to play solo almost exclusively, and my experience has been quite bad for a lot of reasons, but one of them has indeed been a cascading series of levers that just keep coming and leaving and coming and leaving. Because when you show up to a game where, you're halfway through or even maybe the first push, the whole game's still ahead of you, but now you're down a person and the ult economy is skewed because you'll have somebody that's kind of out of sequence. It might mean that you show up after the team has reached point, so you're about to run in. They'll all die by the time you get to them, or as you're halfway back, then the team will push forward on the other side and then kill you before you can get back out of that scenario. And so then you're down in ult charge, your team is out of sequence, everything's kind of screwed up, and they can just ride that momentum for the rest of the round and win. And that feels terrible. So one lever can have a pretty profound impact, but then often it ends up being multiple levers, and not only multiple levers, but then it kills the morale, and then people start flaming each other in chat, and it just kind of leads to more and more toxicity, because there's just always this undercurrent of toxicity anyway, so any excuse people can seize upon to start flaming each other, they will. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear that kind of holistically you guys feel like quick play is operating better.
Yeah, no, it 100% is. Like tens of percentages drops in lever rates.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah. Which also leads to a good philosophical question, which is that, like, who is playing quick play in your mind? Like, what is the vision of what is quick play, what is arcade, and what is competitive? Like, who are the people playing the modes, and what are the modes for? Because people often disagree that, comp is for this and quick play is for that. But what is your guys' vision?
This is, I think, super interesting. And actually, I bet that on the team, there's probably a little bit of like, differing opinions here. But like, what I hold to with quick play specifically is that, a lot of people, like creators or like hardcore competitive players, they're like, well, competitive is the game, right? Competitive is Overwatch. And I'm like, it's not. It is. Quick play is as much the game as competitive. And why I say that, because like more people play quick play than play comp. Like it is the biggest of the queues. Like it is people, it is Overwatch for a huge part of the community. And so I as the EP for the game need to protect that experience for those people who like only view the game through that one lens of like quick play is Overwatch.
This is a kind of a critical quote for my understanding of how the development team views the game. As I've said just prior, and I know I kind of touched on this topic already, but people really seize on the idea that quick play isn't Overwatch and that comp is. So for them to say they need to protect the experience of quick play, that actually means quite a lot. And what I mean by that is it means they also have to work on not only dealing with the levers problem, but also the matchmaking. And I have just today had the experience of going up against 6 games in a row versus Smurfs. I solo queue, they queue in groups. They're masters, I'm plat. That feels terrible. I got rolled 6 games in a row in a way that there was absolutely nothing I could have done about it, and then flamed and BM'd on top of it because they think they're better people because they're a higher rank. And how pathetic is that you queue in a group with people who are higher rank, they know they're beating people who are lower rank, and then still need to act as if they're superior anyway, when it's just like he just came on, like an NBA player came onto a Little League. An NBA player, an MLB player came onto a little league field and like pushed over a bunch of kids and like, ha, pussy. And that's the experience that you get when you allow such a wide dearth in matchmaking rank between each other. They think they're essentially, and this is, I think, the highest priority when it comes to the team's perspective, is at all ends, the only thing we care about is getting matches together as fast as possible to keep engagement up. And so they're quite willing to take people in Masters and put them in with Gold and Plat teams because that just gets the games going faster. There's tremendously more people in Bronze, Silver, and Gold than there are in GM and Plat, obviously. Or GM and Masters and Diamond, I should say. And when someone in GM queues, if they don't mix them in with those lower rank queues, those people in GM and Masters are going to be waiting, I don't know, about 10, 20 minutes potentially, as that used to be the case. So the place for them to seem to need to go is into quick play. And that is not a palatable solution. You can't just put a Masters tank up against a Gold tank. It won't be a fun game, obviously. I shouldn't need to say that. But that's a thing that happens regularly, and in terms of the way the game, the players receive that, they never seem to actually care. It's just about, we diffed you, we're better than you, all of this garbage. And they need to recognize that needs to be sorted out. There needs to be another solution, and it's not what they have now. And I guess that is where we're going ultimately, is wider and narrow queue groups with regard to next season's upgrade to the comp system. I don't think that'll have any knock-on effects to quick play, though, unless they also add it in there. I don't think they will, though, because they still want to prioritize engagement and fast matches above all else.
So people will, I see people be like, why are quick play games so sweaty? And I'm like, because Overwatch is a sweaty game. Overwatch is a competitive, fast-paced game.
Quick play is more sweaty
than
comp now.
It's not chill. Like, you can play Mystery Heroes and chill out. That's
it really is. I'm not joking.
So I tend to view, quick play and competitive both as sort of the core of what Overwatch is. And I view arcade as a more casual sort of like, you can be there to goof off and have fun with friends, or you can be there to try out new stuff, or, whatever. But this opinion that like quick play is somehow like secondary to competitive is, in my mind, not right. Like, that's not what the game is. The game is quick play and competitive, and they're both, they're both,
and that's how I've taken it myself, honestly.
Maybe hardcore is not the right way to put it, but they're both pretty intense, and that is what this game is.
Right. So you're kind of putting them on a similar pedestal then. Like, what is like kind of the competitive? Is just like the notch up? Is that fair to say?
I think it's just people who care about that sort of like that, having that rating applied to themselves, who always want to push it a little bit further. The way that I view it, I'll give you like my personal version of it, which is, I care a lot about feeling like I'm getting better at something every single match. Like, I've moved from this sort of like extrinsic reward motivation, where, and this is using nerdy game developer terms, but like
extrinsic, it's a psychology term, Jared. It's not a game developer term.
For being good, like I'm getting something from outside of myself for it. Versus intrinsic, which is like, I am playing the game because I want to feel like I'm getting better every single time, or I am validating myself for like this experience I had, like, oh, my Ana's getting better, or like, oh, I learned how to do this thing with Reinhardt that I couldn't do before. Like, that's the kind of thing that I
don't know what he just said. He just kind of trailed
comp, I think, is more about like having that thing that is telling you kind of like how good you are compared to where you were, how good you are compared to other people. It gives you something to brag about, and like, that has like higher stakes. It's like a higher stakes version of quick play. Where quick play is just the game, and it's just you are playing for whatever your reason is.
Really strange that he doesn't bring this up, but quick play and comp are a different format. Quick play is an abridged version of comp. Usually you play an attack and a defense in comp, and in quick play you only play one side or the other, and that cuts the matches down quite substantially in terms of length. But it is just a different format. The inability to both attack and defend, it just leads to different outcomes. And so to act as if they're exactly the same is a bit weird too. There is no comp equivalent of quick play exactly. You can't play a casual version of comp that isn't ranked. So I just don't really get not saying that. It does seem worth mentioning. Hi, Rolf.
Mine is to feel like I'm getting better. Other people's is to have fun with their friends. It's, it just depends. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's like above. It's just the motivation is different.
Right. That's very, very interesting. So yeah, I think that definitely affirms the idea that quick play is not for leaving. Because I think there has been
Right.
this idea that like it's this very, you don't really commit to anything when you click the quick play button. You're just kind of like, it's fine, I'll play 5 minutes and then I'll leave. But you guys are kind of the feeling that no, you're kind of, you should have the 10 minutes or whatever that it takes for a quick play game when you queue into a quick play game.
100%. Like this is not a game that has 40-minute matches. You know what I mean? Like if you're jumping into quick play, the time commitment is pretty short, and so
It's usually between like 6 and 12 minutes for a quick play match, especially when you queue into a lost match. I've had them as short as 3 minutes. Feels terrible though, because then you basically spent the same amount of time queuing and getting into the game as you are actually playing it, and then you're back into the queue again right away after that.
the expectation that I have and that we want players to have is if you're going to play in quick play, like be there for the match, dip after, that's fine. But like, you're committing to these 9 other people to see this thing through, and like the 4 people on your team when you leave are going to be annoyed because they want to win, and now they're down, and that changes the dynamics of the match, and it's not okay.
Aside from that one caveat about not mentioning the format, like I pretty much entirely agree with Jared on that point. It's all pretty much where my head was at as well.
Totally fair. Okay, awesome. So we're gonna move on now from quick play, and we're gonna talk now big picture things. We've had a good little nitty gritty of like current issues, but now I kind of want to talk about big picture things. We've had a year now about to end, and it's potentially going to be a very changed year for Overwatch come 2024. But how do you guys reflect on 2023 for Overwatch? Because this was your first year as Overwatch 2, and of course we spoke when you were just kind of launched the game. So from now to then, kind of just big picture to start with, how does the team feel on the year that's gone by?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny talking, like, I always feel bad representing the team, right? It's like hundreds of people, and everyone, I think, has a bit of a different take, but
I genuinely didn't know there were hundreds of people. I don't know if that happened more recently. I know that they downsized quite a lot for a minute and then kind of built back up again, but I didn't know they were up to hundreds of people. I thought maybe they were at around 100. That's just interesting to hear that said.
Speaking as the lead for the team, and as someone who focuses a lot on like strategy and direction, the way that I feel about it is 2023 was wild. Like what a roller coaster of a year on like just a whole.
For context, the game launched in October 2022, so 2023 has been the first full year of Overwatch 2 being the game, and we've just passed the 1-year anniversary here. Well, because you know what date it is.
A bunch of different fronts, and like what was exciting about it to me was when I joined like 2 weeks after the game launched or something like that. That was when I joined the team for the first time, and I came in with my own ideas of what I wanted the team to be focused on: better communication, like more responsive balancing and updates for players, like a lot of just like make the game like a top quality live game experience. And everybody else had different stuff. Like
what does that mean? I just wanted it to be a top quality live game. Like, okay, how? That feels like it's really glossing over absolutely everything you do as your job, but I'm sure he didn't mean it that superficially.
Artists wanted to make the best art, designers wanted to make the most interesting heroes, like everyone had their own sort of thing, but where it all comes together is like, we want to make a great game. We finish these meetings we do 3 times a week as a team, and it's like, hey, let's go make a great game, and everyone rallies around that sort of like cry. And so I view this as like the beginning of the journey of making Overwatch 2 a great game. Like I think it's great today. I think it's going to be even better, going forward. And if you look at how much it's evolved over the past year, like for me, it's kind of staggering. Like it isn't a different game. So I'm not saying it's evolved in the way that you would come in and be like, I've never cared about Overwatch before. Now with these changes over the past 12 months, it's like a different thing I'm going to try. I'm like, no.
That's exactly the point that they needed to really make a year ago, to be honest. Because on the foundations of the launch of Overwatch 2, they were really speaking a completely different language regarding this point, that really was about to evolve into the redefinition of what a sequel can be. And I know this is not Jared's words, this is more Aaron's words, off the back of PvE and all of the various things that are supposed to happen to differentiate this game from the original game. And the main thing that was supposed to be was hero missions and a skill tree RPG system for a PvE campaign that would lead into sort of a potentially multimedia or transmedia campaign where we would see potentially an Overwatch TV show and all sorts of other various things, which I think they're going to touch on a little bit later. But now that the PvE has happened, come and gone, and essentially been not canceled, but downsized to the point of irrelevance, this language of we just want to make the best PvP game possible is the prevailing sentiment that we needed to know when we were initially buying into this premise. And again, it's not really Jared's fault that this all happened, unless it is. We don't still know exactly what happened behind the scenes that caused them to completely reevaluate why PvE was, for 3-4 years, the next best thing that they were planning on making, now devolved into we simply can't do it. But Jared was the one to deliver that message with Aaron Keller, so, you know, it is what it is, I guess. I don't think it'll ever be properly water under the bridge. There's always that vestige of what could it have been. But it's not going to be that now. And delivering that message sooner would have been better, because they said they knew for at least something like 6 months that this was not going to work out the way that they had marketed the game prior to its launch. And I just don't think we should ever let them completely off the hook for holding that back for months and months while we were hoping and praying to hear new news about the thing we wanted the game to be. But now it's a PvP game. PvE is kind of irrelevant.
No, it's Overwatch. But the way that we have like improved, the things we've learned from some of the missteps, like the ideas that we have for next year that build on the things that we've learned, like it really feels like the beginning of this journey and like the first few steps that we're taking that feels super positive. Where at the beginning of you know, the year this year or at the end of last year, it really felt like that sort of like chaos of, okay, we launched a thing and now let's figure out exactly, you know, what to do and what our next step should be. And, oh, let's change a thing for season 2 and season 3. Like it was just.
And it really can't be understated that the team was in a state of chaos, as far as I understand. They were missing key leadership. They were struggling to get new hires trained up fast enough. They were trying to launch this on a deadline that I think was probably too ambitious. They knew they didn't have the content ready that they needed to have in time to launch. So I can only imagine, from the perspective of the developers, that October deadline was probably like a death sentence for a lot of people. It felt like one anyway, I mean. So that feeling of chaos and getting out from underneath that black cloud of launching effectively probably was a massive change in the team's morale. And, well, it'll take another hit when the Steam launch happens, but, you know, just getting out away from that launch was probably a big deal.
Just, you know, it was much more kind of like frantic, and now it feels like, you know, we've learned a bunch. We have a direction that we feel like is good, and there's a bunch of like hype stuff coming up next year that you know makes me super excited about where we're going. So, sorry, a long-winded answer. But,
yeah, I love to hear.
Come back. It feels like the beginning of a journey where, you know, the first few steps had some like positive notes and some negative notes, and now it's like, all right, let's go. Let's just move forward. We know what the game is.
Right. So yeah, it's good to hear that you guys feel like you're coming into your groove now. Because I guess for a lot of people, they expect Overwatch to be the culmination of years of effort and work, and then it would like drop and be this game. But, you know, maybe in reality, it's kind of like, well, actually, you're just getting into the what Overwatch 2 is supposed to be, and now you're trying to make that vision a reality.
It really feels to me like it was presenting the players with their expectations and then training them to understand what the game was going to be was really what they wanted us to get out of this. Like, getting us aligned with their expectations more than the other way around, if you know what I mean. That was really the biggest hurdle. And all of the bad news that needed to be delivered to finally get us to settle on this is what the game is, I guess. And so now we'll try and improve it from here. I know I'm being a bit fatalistic in phrasing it and framing it that way, but it just did feel that way as somebody who played the game through, you know, the end of Overwatch 1 and into the launch of the sequel. It was days of bad news all the time. Everything felt like, you know, does this game even have a chance? Is it going to be here in a year? And I'm not entirely still that convinced. I still think there's a chance that they may have doubled down on a live service model at a time when live service models are starting to, their bubble is popping. And I'm starting to see news coverage where other people are coming to this conclusion as well, that maybe live services are lessening in their impact around the industry, if not to the point of the bubble popping. But I think that is ultimately where that goes once that is no longer a knock-on effect that people seek.
That framing is actually better than what I said and much shorter. So yes, thank you. But like, I think there's this misguided sort of like approach that happens in game development sometime, where it's like, we have this idea that's going to be incredible. We're going to drop it on everybody, and they'll all love it, and then we'll all just move on to the next thing because we will have created this perfect masterpiece. And you've seen the shift in recent years where that's not the approach. Games like Baldur's Gate, which is like incredible, and I bought in early access, what feels like a long time ago. Like, that game learned from its community before it had its big official launch, and that launch went super well. For us, there's this acknowledgement that like the idea that the team could build this like beautiful, perfect thing that they could just kind of bestow on the community and then everything would be fine, is like, that's not really how modern games work. That's especially not how competitive games work. Like, you really need to build the game along with your community. And like,
it's just funny to see, and I know this has nothing to do with anything Jared has done or said, but it's funny to see him espousing that particular attitude that the game needs to grow with its community and all, when Overwatch League was a thing that was literally forced upon the community that really I don't know if it was ready for, and ultimately it failed. So, yeah, I guess, yeah, you're right. Hans, thank you very much for the 44 months. Welcome back again.
like that's where we've been focused this year. And so, yeah, it's interesting. It wasn't the culmination of a thing at all. It was, and I used to say this in meetings with the team, it's like, this is shipping a game is like the beginning of a marathon, especially a live game. Like, this is where,
Right.
you need to settle in. You have to find your rhythm. You're going to start going a little too fast at first and then get tired. And then you got to like step back. And, we're at that point now where, we're a few miles into the marathon, and I feel like we're finally starting to hit our stride.
That's great to hear. Great to hear that you guys kind of feel that energy and motivation, and hopefully that'll.
To be fair, though, what else would he have said, really? Would Jared come out in front of an audience and be like, yeah, guys, we're really having a hard time. We're not able to deliver as much content as you would hope, and the battle pass is suffering. We're not able to churn out mythic skins fast enough, and we need more funding, and we need more manpower, and we just don't really have what we need, guys. I don't know what to tell you. Overwatch 2 is really going to fail, and probably we've only got a few months left. He's not going to say that. It really doesn't matter. Like, what he says here is not really necessarily reflective of anything other than this is how he decided to get through the interview. But anyway, didn't mean to shit all over what he said. It really wasn't that bad of a thing that he said. I just wanted to throw that out for contrast.
Reflect in what you launch. But you mentioned Baldur's Gate, also amazing game. I loved every minute of it. That brings up, while Baldur's Gate is not your competitors, there are obviously other games out there that are kind of seeking to exist in the rough similar space as Overwatch. How do you guys feel like you have performed compared to your competitors? I'll say, you don't have to say that, like, Valorant and Apex, even Fortnite, such games, even even MOBAs in some way we compete with. Whatever you guys view as your competitors, how do you feel like?
I just have to say the framing here, although I agree it's fine, and for the purpose of the interview, it does make a decent point. I'm not sure there really is a direct competition to Overwatch, which is a lot of why so many people in the community felt trapped by it. That all these bad decisions and all these problems that we didn't agree with, we still kept playing it because there really wasn't something great to transition off of it to. Generally, the only real close competition that people tend to cite is Paladins, and I've played Paladins. It doesn't feel as good as Overwatch. It's definitely lower in terms of polish. The gameplay moment to moment just has a less impactful feel. It's not a bad game per se, it's just not really better, and it doesn't really feel like it's on the same level in almost any way. But I probably still would play it a little bit. Just, it isn't like a thing I would grind for hours and hours or aspire to be really good at personally.
You've performed against them.
It was interesting because I was going to ask you who you think our competitors are, and I feel like you just named a few that is
funny enough. They don't mention Paladins.
Kind of reflecting on this myself. And what's interesting is I don't really think that we have like specific, unique one-for-one competitors, right? Like in the marketplace, like Overwatch, shares elements with a bunch of different games, but like it feels unique. And so I don't want to cop out on the question, but just
he's kind of right, honestly. I don't really believe there is a direct competitor, and as you said, Jobert, there's a lot of perception things about this. You probably remember back when Overwatch launched, everyone compared Overwatch to Battleborn, and those two games really weren't that much alike either. It's just, you see hero shooter, and you just assume, well, it's got a bit of a MOBA flair to it. It's a shooter game, and it's got, classes, essentially. But no, there's a bit more to it than that, and there really isn't another game that has the same level of strategy and team awareness and counterplay and all of that stuff. So, yeah, I really don't think there is a direct competition to Overwatch. Maybe there should be.
Just to start it, like, it really did feel like, for me, that, like, there really isn't, like, a game that's exactly this.
Right.
It's doing exactly this thing. And so
TF2 might be
when I think
closer,
about Fortnite,
actually,
like,
than I
Fortnite
realized,
is like
yeah.
the everything game. And like Lego Fortnite, I played it before work today. Like, it's great. It's wild. And, like, the way that they changed their entire...
Sorry, Blue Skyleaf, would you recommend playing the finals? Do you think in some way, it has parity with Overwatch at all? Because I need to actually try it. I haven't done it yet. And I was told they used AI for their voice acting, and that kind of pissed me off, so I really didn't want to dip my toe into that necessarily, but I did watch the trailer for it, and it looked alright. And there were a couple of neat things about it, and apparently has pretty good movement. Really like the finals. Has a lot of cheaters and a bit of balancing stuff, but the core is amazing. Alright. Good tip. I guess I'll have to give it a look then. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt again.
Like, map constantly, the way that they introduce new mechanics kind of constantly into the game. Like, Fortnite is awesome, but it's the everything variety game, which is not
Fortnite has
awesome,
nothing
right?
to do with Overwatch.
But we are both shooters, so I guess there's some overlap there.
Right.
Apex is like BR, it's like speed BR, maxed out, right? Like, it's crazy movement, traversal stuff. It's like big open world. So, like, it is. I love Apex. It's just also very different from us. And Valorant, which I also think is awesome and love, and was playing last week. Like, it's just, attack shooters are a different thing, right? They're hyper strategic. They're all about clicking heads.
I gotta be real, as much as I'm put off by the AI thing, like, I'm also supporting a Blizzard game by talking about Overwatch at the same time, so, like, I'm already a bit of a scum. Not that I'm using that to justify I should play the finals necessarily, just gotta be self-aware a bit about that.
Before other people can click heads, like, it's a super stylish game, like, which is rad, but just a very different vibe from ours, like, much more edgy. So all these games, I think,
Valorant
awesome,
is pretty edgy, isn't it?
But they're not Overwatch. Like, Overwatch is its own kind of unique thing, and so it's hard because if I try to compare myself to, like, a Fortnite, and I'm like, well, how is Overwatch compared to Fortnite? I'm like, well, it's not. I don't know. It's different. It's like comparing apples to...
Do you notice he just said, if I were to compare myself to Fortnite? So he sees himself as Overwatch. It's just a bit of a slip there, but I thought that was kind of funny.
Ferraris or whatever. Like, I don't know. They're like different...
Apples and Ferraris.
And so I think we're doing, like...
I kind of want to go back to hear that little nugget again. 49...
But they're not Overwatch. Like, Overwatch is its own kind of unique thing, and so it's hard because if I try to compare myself to, like, a Fortnite, and I'm like, well, how is Overwatch compared to Fortnite? I'm like, well, it's not. I don't know. It's different. It's like comparing apples to Ferraris or whatever. Like, I don't know. They're like different things entirely. And so I think we're doing, like, when I think about how the game is doing, I think the game is doing well, and I'm excited about the game. And so I think about in the space that we occupy. Like, I don't know, I'm super happy with it. But I always feel weird about comparing us to games that are like, they serve different motivations. They're just like different things entirely. Because I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to steal players from Fortnite. I'm not trying to steal players from Valorant. Like, I just like that all these things exist and people can be excited about them.
I think that, honestly, this is some of the most, like, candid he's been the whole way, because I genuinely feel like he's just saying this off the top of his head. And he's probably being truthful about it because, yeah, there really isn't a need to compare it that much to those games. I don't know if he's trying to steal players from other... I'm sure he wouldn't mind having more players. But, yeah, I don't know that they're actively courting Fortnite players in any particular way. They're just kind of doing stuff. And if people come on over, then they have.
And get different things out of them.
Right, and I do think Overwatch, the appeal of Overwatch, especially at launch, was this kind of new era of FPS gaming where it was like so many different things that could bring you into the game. I myself never played an FPS game and came into it gravitating towards like the Reinhardts and the Winstons, and obviously some people like the Mercy.
Honestly, don't think that should be understated. The fact that there are options for people that don't want to play a high-skill aim shooter in a typically seen as high-skill aim shooter that's a very cool option to have. And there aren't very many games that play to that level of diversity in it. The fact that you can play as a melee character or a like specifically designated as a support character who mostly their movement is their defense, that's really cool. Those different skill levels and different abilities, and I think this is possibly why I've stuck around with this game so much. The fact that there's so much crossover between different tactics and different abilities you learn from one hero to the next, you can actually kind of cross-pollinate your skills if you learn this hero versus that hero, and then you kind of open up like a tree, like a branching tree, all the different options that might play better to what you've now established as your personal skill set. So you kind of have your own path that you navigate the roster through as you play more and more heroes. And that's how I was able to get up to freaking 2.3 thousand hours played in this game, because you can keep approaching it from different angles and learning new things and broadening your skill set that way. So the more they add new heroes that are meaningfully different with different skill sets and different tactics to them, I think that brings in new players, and I don't think that it should be seen as a negative to have very high skill ceiling heroes and very low skill floor heroes rather. Those things are both important to the player base, even though for some reason the player base seems to really want to gatekeep and be elitist about it. There's no harm in playing Moira. There's no harm in playing Mercy. And I don't even agree with them about what they say about Mercy anyway. Encourage that more. Good.
These and stuff. So that's all great to hear. Do you kind of see a world, obviously, there's so many different metrics for measuring success, right? It can be player counts, it can be monetization for some people, like how much money the game is making or how many views it's getting. Do you see a world where like Overwatch is kind of like sitting up top of the Twitch category, or YouTube is like, trending videos are all Overwatch the way like Minecraft trends so often in like, YouTube, just the general space. Do you see that as like a realistic vision for Overwatch, or is that not the kind of game that you're kind of trying to make?
So I guess there's two things there. One, I do see a world where that's possible, and you see it in some of our bigger events, like where we get like pretty huge viewer counts on stuff like Twitch, and like I don't view Twitch views as like necessarily the success metric or anything.
Good. Everybody needs to stop doing that. It's really annoying. The thing that really gets me frustrated is whenever a new game comes out and there's this massive spike, which there literally always is when a new game comes out, the player number reaches a massive spike. And then immediately there's a bunch of media people and content creators going, look how many players they've lost in X time. You just have to pay more damn attention to how video games work, because they all do that. It doesn't matter if they lose a lot of players in a week or 2 weeks or whatever. It's where they sit on average over X amount of time. Every game has a tail. It's just, where does that tail go? And then looking at Twitch viewership as if you're winning or losing based on that is also very silly.
Anything, but like knowing that people are engaged with your game is really important, and so it is definitely one of our metrics that we look at. Like, are people like making a bunch of content about this? Are they interested enough and excited enough? Are people excited enough to watch that stuff? Like, so I do view our future as having a bunch of opportunities to be at the top of that list, right?
It's another sort of metric of community goodwill is the other thing, and I think this is where maybe Jared misses the mark a lot of the time. He sort of touched on it there, that players want to feel so energized by the game that they want to create content about it. You have to sort of seed the ground for people to feel that. You have to give a lot to get back even more. And so investing in goodwill in the community, whether that comes in the form of consistently giving away skins, or removing heroes from the battle pass, or just whatever the community is asking for that feels like you're up against it in terms of, we could be charging X dollars for X or for Y. Sometimes just saying, what if we just chose to not charge here? What if we chose to take a different path? Would that result in an investment in community goodwill that might actually result in us getting that goodwill back tenfold later on? Rather than seeing it as, get what we can while we can and burn whatever bridges it takes to get there is kind of how it feels. So again, I know I beat this horse quite a bit earlier. I really think that he often puts the cart before the horse regarding this, and those metrics will obviously increase if the community is happier. The community is not happy.
Okay, so from plans that we have for next year, the two things I was going to cite, I can't talk about.
I should qualify. Some of the community is happy. That's the community he wants to acknowledge. The rest of the community kind of waits and watches, I guess.
So there's two pretty big things where I'm like, these could like break out and be really big and super fun. And like, I think, there's a there. But I think to step back a little bit, our goal isn't to hit some sort of like top of the market, like we are the pinnacle thing, like we want to make a great game. And like, I think that is a really interesting distinction, because if our goal was, have completely dominate the FPS market, like completely change the face of whatever, like the way that we would go about that would be very different than what we're doing now.
That feels like it should be a really interesting point of reflection there, to say, how would they do that differently if they went down that road? If they did want Overwatch to absolutely dominate the market. And then the next question is, why wouldn't you want that? Because you're reporting, well, for the next couple weeks to Bobby Kotick, which, as far as I can tell, that's the only thing he's interested in, is increasing his portfolio in profitability for, stockholders and for his own wallet. Why would you not be interested in that? That seems really counter to a lot of the decisions that you seem to be making on a daily basis in the actual Overwatch client. For example, the $5 Christmas premium battle pass and the, ultimate battle pass with 2 extra skins in it, and all of these little nickel and dime, but I mean, they're not nickel and dime, they're like entire retail price of a game and dime. So they're not microtransactions, they haven't been. I don't know, I'm very confused by that. It seems a bit off from what the actual actions are than what he's saying here.
Like, we're so focused on, like, just make a good live game. Like, just really focus on, like, being responsive, being adaptive, changing the meta in ways that people are excited about. Like, just do those things super well, and then you can build on that and grow. It's just a different approach. And so, I love the game. Like,
what it strikes me here is, I think really the truth is they're just trying to get by. As a dev team, they're trying to just make it work. And I think they were so barely together as a cohesive unit for a team to actually release this game. I'm not sure they were able to think that far ahead to how would we dominate the market, what strategy would we employ within this game. They just literally want to get enough content to release a battle pass in 9 weeks. I'm reading really far into it here, and I might be completely off base, but the way he's saying that, it just strikes me as like, I'm just getting by, man. I'm just doing the best I can week to week.
Play all the games that we've talked about that are in our competitive space, and like, but what we want to do is like make Overwatch the best version of Overwatch it could be, and then we have ideas for building on that I'm really excited about. But like, you don't want to go 5 steps ahead of where you are today, right? Like, just make sure you're still moving forward, that people are still happy with.
They're going to touch on, I think, what the real future of Overwatch is pretty soon, and probably should have been the headline, really, when it comes to this interview, because they kind of let slip. Anyway, go ahead.
Understandable. Speaking of trying to make a great game, then, that leads me nicely to ask how you what do you think is your greatest success in the year gone by, and also what do you think is the kind of area that you need to improve on the most? Like, so what is the part that you guys did really well, and what's the part that you guys look back and think, okay, this is where we need to really improve on going forwards? Because just to give a framing, actually, I remember last time when we spoke, you said that you kind of really wanted to make sure players engage more and feel like they want to play longer and complete the battle pass and feel rewarded for completing the battle pass. So, for example, is that something you guys feel like you've done?
Yeah, I mean, it's I will be interested to hear your answers to this, by the way, at the end of it, because I want to know what your take is. But for me, I think what I really cared about at the beginning of the year was, we want players to feel rewarded for the time that they spent. We want them to feel good about the game and how it's evolving. We want them to feel like it's alive and responsive.
Sometimes
We don't want it to feel like it's stagnant and sort of like the kind of like what happened at the end of Overwatch 1 when the team was split focus on PvE and PvP is
What he means by that, if you weren't around to experiencing it, the end last 2 years or so of Overwatch 1 was it was closer to 3 actually. We were kind of strung along to, hey, we've kind of deferred all of our team onto working Overwatch 2 now, because we're building this massive PvE system and all of these various features, new AI things, and all sorts of new heroes, and we're going to basically culminate all of this work and effort that we've done for years in Overwatch 2 with all of this stuff. And so what happened was they kind of wound down and put us into maintenance mode on Overwatch 1, and they kind of stopped delivering the same events and, amount of skins and various new things. They stopped releasing heroes, and they started saying, well, everything that you would have gotten is going to be in Overwatch 2 now. And so we were just sort of strung along with, here's the next thing, but look forward to, in a year when we'll have more new news about this. And so we just got year after year after year of, but Overwatch 2 is going to solve everything, and Overwatch 2 is going to have everything you're missing now and more. And so Overwatch 2 comes out, it had 3 heroes, and PvE was cut out of it for a later release, only for them to later cancel PvE in a meaningful way. I mean, they released 3 missions, but it was supposed to be a whole thing, and an RPG mode that was endlessly replayable, and all of this stuff just never really happened. So that's where Overwatch 1 ended, and player retention and frustration was at a real fever pitch when Overwatch 2 came out, only to find out it was very overly monetized, and then in 6 months to find out they canceled the thing we were all looking forward to anyway.
Is like my goal to avoid at all costs forever, right?
Yeah, so he never wants that again.
Everyone to understand and believe and feel that like this is a game that's like very well supported. That
Heisey Gamer
changes kind of in service of them. And so when I think back about what I view as our biggest success, there's like moments that stand out of like Le Seraphim was like.
That's the point right there. What was your biggest success? Did you add meaningful improvements to the core gameplay? Did you make the players happier than ever? Did you add heroes that made you really excited to get back into the game? Did you add, world building, core concepts to the game? Launch a new multimedia journey through the Overwatch history? Le Seraphim was the answer. Le Seraphim was a collaboration with a K-pop band where they charge $50 for 5 skins. That's the future of Overwatch 2. Right there. He just spelled it out for you. That's what he's the most proud of. They managed to get a ton of money out of people by collaborating with a K-pop group. And what he sees as his biggest accomplishment was people bought it.
Pretty sick. And we didn't, we were hopeful that people would like it and be excited about it, but you never know. And so there's things like that where that popped off and we were like, great. That's really helpful for us to know going forward.
That little, great. That was him going, fuck, thank God, something we can sell them that they'll buy for an unbelievable price. They felt like they got away with something because people bought so much of this digital skin package.
So yeah, and specific hero releases Alari stands out as one.
It's great that he does reference a hero, but he absolutely wanted to say Le Seraphim was top of mind, first thing that came to mind about this. Which really, I think that gives away the whole game. That is where they're at from a game perspective. That's the priority.
Where it's like, God, what a
and he will reinforce that more in the rest of this.
Alari added something interesting to the meta. So there's very specific things. But if I step back, the really boring, project lead type answer that I'll give you is I feel like we all just kind of got better at what we were doing, over the course of the year. And that feels really good. When you're leading a team, what you want is for those people to constantly be, improving in their craft or, delivering better stuff or whatever.
Right.
And I'm not saying we did it perfect. We didn't. But when I think about where we were at the beginning of the year and I think about where we are now, just how far we've come and how much we've learned and how much better we are than a year previous us, that's the biggest success for me, which I know is kind of a boring answer because I'm sure you wanted me to be
I get
the greatest thing was the battle pass or whatever. It's not.
I mean, what you said was actually worse though. saying a collaboration for a skin bundle is the first thing you think of, and that's worse than the Battle Pass to me. Because you could have at least innovated on the Battle Pass. You could have made a scenario where the Battle Pass actually was the best in the industry, right? That's what they had done with loot boxes, whether or not people in the community want to admit to it. It was possibly the most generous loot box system. You got them all the time, and you pretty much could get everything as far as cosmetics without paying anything for them if you wanted to play enough. So it's real weird that was, well, it's not weird, it's obvious, but that it sucks is really what I'm trying to say. Zgamaras, who's the guy doing the interview? That's SVB. He's a Overwatch content creator and has hosted the Group Up podcast for quite a long time, and he brings together a lot of the various members within the Overwatch sphere and has discussions with them. Very pertinent discussions. He's a very good leader when it comes to doing interviews. So I think he was exactly the right person to have this interview with. And he's a quite level-headed person when it comes to speaking as well. So I think he came across quite well in the interview for me. Yeah, you can check him out there. There is links on Twitch and YouTube. And he's also on Twitter as well.
No, it's good to note that like stuff like the La Seraphim collab. I think the community feels the same way. Like the La Seraphim collab was really great. Before I actually talk about that a little bit more, just the latter half of the question, like what is kind of an area of improvement?
Didn't go great? Yeah.
Like what do you guys feel like you could do better?
Here's what the thing that I believe is true is that I mentioned sort of like this grand reveal. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but like the grand reveal idea where we're gonna make a thing for a long period of time. We're not really going to get any feedback from the community about it. And then we're just going to like drop it on everybody and be like, here you go. Hope you love it.
It strikes me as odd because like they do actually have a content creator Discord and there's like a content creator beta access channel. So they do have members of the community that can speak to some of these pre-release options. I don't know what it is about the way they've got it structured at the moment where it's not really effective enough. Granted, their solution, which is going to be to basically copy what they did with Malga, give a weekend of access to everyone, whatever new features they're planning. I do think that's fine. We used to have a PTR. They shut that down. Public Test Realm is essentially just like a beta access channel you could download the client for, and anybody could jump in and play a new hero before it was released. And then it wasn't really a great way to give feedback, but they would supposedly, I guess, open up channels for that if they needed it. And as I said, they've got a content creator Discord where they do share information. They also had an experimental card on Overwatch 1, which was a really easy way to play new features. But I guess they're just going to go the route of just putting stuff into the game now, which I think is fine. Just don't know why it was confusing or difficult to get us back to that point when we already had solved this problem in 2 ways in like 5 years ago.
Love it. We've got to get better about that. And so, we've talked a lot about the big comp rework that we're doing, and we've been getting more and more eyes on that.
Hi, Brinzer.
On it and trying to understand what people don't like about it. I think we're going to do more of that before it launches. Like, this idea that...
The comp rework, by the way, is what I was talking about earlier. They're going to add a system where you have either narrow or wide groups when it comes to SR matching. So you'll be playing... If you're playing solo, like I often do, it'll group you with other people playing solo. But if you're playing with a large disparity between your SR, say you're a diamond player with a silver friend, and you're both in the same group, it'll try and match that same disparity on the other team and not necessarily pull in solo players who will then get stomped by it, which is a great change if they pull it off the way that they're claiming they might. And so they're saying they might actually add some, prior to release, some test factor about that, and that's coming out in about a month or so. I don't remember when this season ends. I think we're about a month off.
That like before progression's another great example of this. We dropped this big progression feature on the community.
Oh, and the other thing I should mention is they're also reverting their SR loss and gain system to the way it worked in Overwatch 1, which is just ridiculous that it took this long for them to get to this conclusion. Nobody liked it. What it does currently, and they've lessened it multiple times, you need to win 5 games or lose 15 games before they update your current rank NSR, essentially. So right now, you're kind of in the dark about what your actual rank is until you complete enough games, up to 20 games, to actually see the rank change. and people are like really weirdly confused about what their rank is, even though there's a percentage at the bottom that says like you're this high over the other people in your rank. So if you haven't ranked up, you might be about to in the next one, but they're just not transparent about how ranking works, and people don't understand there's still the same SR system as was in Overwatch 1. They just don't show it to you anymore. So every time you win a match, you might gain, 25 SR, and every time you lose one, you might lose 14 or something, but they don't see any of that. You just see you're this percentage in this rank. And so now they're going to change it back to the way it worked in 1, where you literally just see your SR go up and down with a bar. And it's just as direct as it was before. You just see it each game in comp when you win or lose. Pretty straightforward, but they were trying to protect us from, I guess, being upset that we lost rank, and it just didn't work. I don't know why it took them this long, but thankfully they're at least doing something about it.
And we were like scrambling to get it done, make sure it was good, and then we got a bunch of feedback that we could have sort of avoided had we just engaged with people much earlier. Creators who are under NDA and stuff, or like just by putting previews out into the game early and helping people see stuff before it goes.
And nobody universally liked the SR changes. Every single creator was upset about this. And so for them to say, like, we didn't have enough feedback, at Season 1, you had enough feedback, but I guess it took this long to get through the pipeline for this to be the top priority, because I guess there's a lot they had to fix prior to that.
It was live. We did that with Malga, and it was like a huge success, right? For us, it was big because we were able to get balanced feedback from the BlizzCon thing that we did, where players could play at the show or at home, and like that was huge. And so I think that like proves the point of like we got to stop dropping features and these big things on everybody without any sort of preview or any sort of feedback moments, and get better about building the game along.
And I have to say, the reason why I feel like they always would drop things out of nowhere is because they were constantly making decisions they knew were going to result in bad will. Changes that they didn't want to cop to in development would just get pushed on the next big patch, and then there was always a wave of, this is annoying, why did you do this? So the problem is, if they actually make decisions now that are not great for the game or piss off the community, they actually have to like own up to the fact that they knew about these things before they properly launched and didn't change them. So, I mean, it remains to be seen how that ethos is going to play out, but so far it hasn't been great. They've liked to say how transparent they've been about things, but I just disagree. They've done little PR moments here and there where they try to talk to the community, but just saying things when they're ultimately empty things and ultimately turn out to be promises that don't culminate in anything, it feels worse than not saying anything at all. So this interview by itself, by the way, I would consider kind of still one of those things, but it's a little bit more personal than usual, I guess.
Along with people and making sure that, like, we're never going to get it perfect, but if we can get it 80%, and then that last 20% is just like the polish that makes it really, really sing, then great. But I think that's the area where we've struggled the most and that we need to keep focusing on.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you call it the grand reveal. I call it the Beyonce approach of drop an album with no promotion. But is there plans in the work for like ways of getting more active feedback before like things get too far along? Like, is there any ideas?
So I love when I get to talk to you and just say stuff that our PR team doesn't know about. That's
me
cool.
too.
I'm
Me
sure
too.
they love it too. I'm sure that they really enjoy it too. So I think I won't say anything specific, but what I will kind of hint to is the way that we handled Malga is, I think, the way that we should be handling most big pieces of content in the game, right? Where it is.
I'm sorry to go off track, but I just wanted to address something I saw in chat there regarding your SR gain and loss. It is not at all a personal performance metric. They have stripped that away. The only thing that matters is if you win or you lose. And it can vary your SR a little bit if you win versus a team that is much better than you in terms of rank. If there's a large rank disparity and you beat them anyway, you might gain more. You might also gain more if you win multiple matches in a row, because there's a kind of Smurf compensation system that's meant to boost you faster through the ranks, and especially if they don't have much data for your account, they tend to boost you up higher than you're meant to be, so that way you can't ruin matches for lower ranked players, and then they'll adjust you back down as you lose matches after the fact. But you don't actually gain a different amount if you perform the best on your team, which I don't really have enough working knowledge of other systems to know what's superior in this case. So that's just how that works.
A thing where we have an idea, we're getting, we're getting internal and like external feedback from people about the direction, but it's usually like under NDA. It's like a smaller group of people or whatever. Where with Malga, then we were able to go really, really wide with it once we were pretty confident in the direction, and then that informed a bunch of changes that we made before we even launched the hero. And so I want us to do a lot more of that. We have plans to do a lot more of that, but it's not just heroes. It's for potentially changes to the core gameplays, or to new systems that we might be releasing, or to things like new modes. And so we have plans for things that I won't get super specific about, that are like giving the community early previews before we launch something, so that
I can tell you what those things are already. I'm not sure if Jared realizes this, but we already know what he's referring to here, and that's the idea that there might be a pick and ban phase added to the game, as well as the potential of tokens that will allow you to swap a certain number of times per match. So they're probably going to be trialing those, and they hinted that they might trial them in comp, maybe for a weekend or something, just to give us a quick preview and see how it goes down. But yeah, that's what those things are that he's referring to, unless there's more things. But there's been ideas toying around with the idea of a pick and a ban phase in Overwatch for as long as Overwatch has been a thing. They've never really done it, and they've said multiple times that it would probably break the game, because whatever hero ends up being meta will always be banned. And that might be terrible for the game. I don't know. I have not seen it play out, so... And then the other thing is they may give you 5 tokens, so you can only swap your hero so many times to try and counteract the rock, paper, scissors mechanics getting to be too frustrating. I don't think they should do that personally. I'm in the middle regarding pick and ban. I don't really know how that would work, but the idea that you can continuously counter your enemy is kind of central to the game again, and it feels like we're trying to subvert the idea of how the game works in a way that would probably end up making more people frustrated than it would actually help. I think a thing that this community has really suffered with is this belief that you can be countered so hard that you simply can't play anymore. Not that you should learn how to play into your counters better. And I don't know if you agree, whether you think this is a sort of an immature take, but if you're getting countered so hard that you can't play at all, you might just need to reevaluate your strategy at that point. It is possible that that can happen, obviously, and I'm not saying that it's not something... that will sometimes be frustrating. But for example, if you're trying to dive a Widow and you can't do anything about it, like she just keeps shooting you instantly, maybe approach from a better angle, like you have to route to her, yes. But there are heroes that are better at routing than others, and maybe you one-trick a certain hero and they are countered consistently. But, just work different techniques and strategies and figure out how you can get behind that person or catch them off guard, or use your team as an obfuscation method. So that's kind of how I look at that. I don't think countering is something that we need to, punish, ultimately.
So we can be confident in the direction.
Awesome. I like the sounds of that personally. I think the community anecdotally loved, the experimental card. PTR was, and maybe the dev side didn't feel the same way, but the PTR was really popular as well, I think. So it was always nice.
PTRs are fascinating, by the way, just as an aside, because it's PTRs end up being a really small part of your community, but they are really powerful. So I'm not against PTRs at all. I think it's just us finding what is the best way for us to do that. Is it by hosting a PTR? Is it by putting something into the actual live game and just getting a ton of feedback and data about it all at once? That's where we're going to try to be learning more next year.
It seems to me like setting it up where you're trying to launch something into the client to everyone is so much more work, really, setup time to do that. But what do I know? I mean, I haven't launched a feature in Overwatch. It seems like you'd want to potentially do it in a constrained kind of quarantine space where if something is drastically wrong, you haven't just kind of broken the game for everyone. But I don't know. Maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about there.
Awesome. So to go back to what you mentioned there, your big kind of touching point was Le Seraphim.
Yeah.
What can we expect? That was huge. I think, we kind of started with One Punch Man, and that was great. As someone who loves...
I gotta say, I am quite biased when it comes to collaborations. I see them as literally just ads. I know most people don't agree with me there. I like One Punch Man. I watched the show both seasons. I loved it. I don't want to see Doomfist One Punch Man or what the hell's her name? Kiriko, Witch something. Green-haired Kiriko. I don't care. I don't want to see them in Overwatch. I like to have things in their own distinct worlds. And when I get reminded of all this other stuff, all I see is dollar signs for freaking companies cross-promoting things to us. And the fact that every community seems to eat this stuff up, it's like, I'm clearly the one wrong here. They seem to be absolutely enamored with the idea. And Jared obviously is enamored with it for the reasons I just mentioned. But I'm not on board. I don't like these collaborations. I'm frustrated whenever I see them. And very clearly, based on what he's about to say here, this is something they're going to be doing a lot. They've done 4 of them already, actually, even though they didn't really talk about it fully here. There was the One Punch Man one. There was a Gentle Monster, which cross-promotion, which was for glasses, like gamer glasses or something. I didn't even ever hear of them. But they had like a diva skin for Gentle Monster, which was a recolor of a Battle Pass skin. And then there was like a title card for it as well for your profile picture. Then there was the Le Seraphim one and the Diablo one, which they had the 2 skins, one for Pharah, one for Moira. And that was a whole controversy because you couldn't buy them specifically. You had to buy the $40 Battle Pass Ultimate Edition. Which, by the way, if you buy the premium battle pass, the $10 one, there's no way to upgrade from the $10 one to the $40 one. You just have to buy the whole package, despite the fact that you bought the battle pass. You still pay $40. It doesn't take out $10, which is just stupid. Like, what are you doing with that? You just haven't finished your marketplace properly, if that's a thing that can happen. So I really am frustrated by all of that. They have at least addressed that concern regarding the Moira and the Pharah skin, where you can now buy them individually outside of the Battle Pass thing. They're still $20 each. That's awful, but, you know, at least it's the tiniest step in the right direction.
Loves the anime. I thought it was great, but I know that there's a wider audience who maybe were like, what is this? I don't know. Whereas Le Seraphim has that next level reach. We recently saw Apex collaborate with Final Fantasy VII, which I was very surprised by. That's very cool that they would collaborate by like a whole separate game with, you know, made by a whole different developer. So what is on the cards for Overwatch in terms of collaboration? I'm unless the PR team are gonna lose a couple hairs, I doubt you're gonna tell me anything specific. But is there any sort of big picture ideas of like what you aim for with these collaborations going forwards?
Yeah, I would love to be able to just tell you what the ones we have planned are, because we have a bunch planned for next year. I can't though, for, you know, boring legal reasons and stuff. But like, I think maybe I mentioned this before, so sorry if this is repeating. But like, the approach we had with collabs is we wanted to line up a bunch of different partners that we as a team were excited about for different reasons, and then see what players actually liked. Right? Like, there was a world where we released One Punch Man and people were like, "I don't care about anime collabs," and like, forget.
I'm pretty sure they were quite happy with the idea that One Punch Man was going to do quite well. There was not really a lot of... I can't imagine there was much pushback there, because, like, anime and Overwatch are not that far apart in a lot of ways.
Forget it. Move on to something else. There was a world where we released the Le Seraphim collab, and people were like, K-pop's not really...
That I don't really get, honestly.
And so...
I didn't know who Le Seraphim was. I'd never heard of them prior to them showing up in Overwatch. Well, actually, the first I've heard of them was when there were, like, Twitch streamers previewing that this was a thing that was going to happen, because they saw the skins come out in the shop, in the hero gallery prior to them being released. So we saw the event kind of coming, I guess you could say. But they really played it up. It was a whole thing.
So I think we've done a really good job of lining up a set of collaborations for 2024 that are going to hit on a bunch of different things that people, you know, may or may not love. There's a couple in particular that, like, I personally, because I had not watched One Punch before I joined the team, and then when I found out about the collab, I watched it and thought it was great. But like, that wasn't my thing personally. There's a bunch of stuff that we have next year that, like, personally I am, like, extremely geeked out about, and like even up to last week we were like working through the details of one that we have coming up, and it was just like so exciting that this thing that I personally love is going to have like a representation.
See, this is like way too much time spent gushing about the fact that we're going to sell you cross-promotion ads. This is not the game. I know I also stress a lot about, getting cosmetics in the whole game and making it more about how can I have more attachment to it, and cosmetics are the best way to do that. But this strikes me as like all they think about is how do we get cosmetics to be themed with things we can collaborate with
inside of our game. So I guess my like takeaway would be we have a bunch of different collabs. I would love to collaborate with other video games. Like I think that is so cool when there's like that crossover audience and they get to see something that they love and it's in this different form that they also are excited about. Like I think that that's sick. But there's other stuff too. It's not just anime and that kind of stuff. We have a bunch of other things planned.
Right. So is that kind of like the goal is to kind of pluck from these different sources? So you kind of did anime, his music, maybe TV or movies or something, and games are on the card too. So you kind of want to like engage, if one collaboration didn't do it for a person, another one might do it for the next person.
Yeah, I don't expect, this is true of the game in general, but I don't expect everyone to universally love everything, right? So there'll be stuff that we do in terms of collabs that some people will be like scratching their head about, like, I don't, like, who's that for? I don't really care. But then as long as there is a group of people that it's actually for and they're excited about it, then that's dope. So yeah, our goal is to really like keep trying different things, keep seeing what resonates with the community. And if something doesn't, that's good to know, and we just won't do more of it. But if something does, then we'll find other ways to kind of like double down on that and give people stuff that they can be psyched about.
It's hard to be psyched about it, though, when it's like a $50 investment, like the price of an entire game, like a new game. So I can have 5 skins maybe for heroes I don't play for some cross-promotion for a K-pop band. I get it. Like, he just said, I know this isn't for everyone. But even for the people it's for, like, you're really leveraging how much they want to give you money for this. That's... no more obvious thing could be said. It's capitalism, I know. I'm just tired of it.
Awesome. I love to hear it. Okay, so actually another big, I think, major point in the year for Overwatch was the Steam launch. I think certainly was very, people were very excited when it came out, and of course, you guys are well aware, Aaron kind of joked about it at BlizzCon that, it became this thing where Overwatch became the worst reviewed game in Steam. And I'm glad to hear that you guys had like a good humor about it, but I think this can be one of these situations where actually in the back end it's a lot different than what we perceive as the public, and maybe people see these negative reviews or whatever, but in the back end, was it successful for you guys? Like, did it drive a lot of players to play Overwatch who weren't playing before, or?
Yeah, it's a fair question to ask, because there is not necessarily a direct correlation between becoming the most infamously hated game on Steam and people playing or not playing the game. Funny enough, it may not matter at all what the review score is. People just see it off name recognition, and, it's free. It's free to get into the game, so it probably really doesn't change that much. I know a lot of people that were like pretty excited to not have to launch Battle.net to be able to play Overwatch, because they just really don't like opening other launchers. And I'm not judging them. It's fine, whatever you want to do. But just the idea that you'd be able to get to it from Steam is for some people enough to want to try something.
Yeah.
How did it hit?
Yeah. I view it as a success. I mean, I think that there's like the two elements of it, right? It's like,
isn't that wild? Like, I know what I just said, but just to hear it, to go, worst reviewed game on Steam for a while, I view it as a success. It's just a weird, like, fantasy world cross-section weirdness. I don't know.
The goal with going free to play and the goal with going on platforms like Steam is to make sure that every player who wants to play the game has the chance to play the game, right? Like, and it's really about like meeting players where they are, as opposed to telling them that they have to come to these specific places to play. So that was always the goal, and like, we're game developers, we're game players. Like I spend a ton of time on Steam, like a ludicrous amount of time on Steam, and so. When I think about if it was a success or not, like, we brought a new platform onto the game. We were able to bring a bunch of new players in to the game. We were able to take players who were playing on other platforms, and if they like Steam better, then they were like, oh, actually, this is where I play games anyway. And so, like, we were able to, we saw some people shifting kind of where they were.
Don't you think it's an interesting change in terms of, like, the supply and demand of Blizzard's attitude toward external launchers? that they would even allow this to be a thing. It's sort of an admission in a way that Blizzard no longer gets to dictate the terms of where it is that you get to play your game. It's them sort of admitting, we understand that we're sort of receding in terms of our command of the audience, and we have to let a bit of that power go to then grant it to Steam, a competitor of theirs, or they'd like to frame it that way anyway. That they would see that now as a viable option, whereas a few years ago that would be out of the question. I just think that's sort of an interesting point, isn't it?
Primarily playing from. So like when I step back and I'm like, was it a success? Like the answer for me is a resounding yes. Like it was definitely successful. The launch of it was pretty smooth. Like we had a couple of minor technical issues the first 3 days, and then since then I think it's been mostly smooth.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Also, Microsoft now owns them. That's another admission of the lack of power that they claim over the market in a way. Yeah, I probably could say more about that, but just let it go.
Like, I feel really good about it. Like new players came in, great. The other part of it where like, you know, players use it to voice their frustrations, and then a bunch of non-players use it to voice their frustrations. I think obviously as a developer feels terrible. Like you never want to disappoint people, right? And so like the team seeing all these negative reviews pouring in and seeing articles about how it's, you know, the most negatively reviewed game. That part sucked. Like I'm not gonna lie, that was rough. But then you step back and you're like, okay, so you know, disregard for the moment these people who, you know, are kind of like jumping on other people's legitimate complaints and think about what we're able to do here. And it's like,
ignore for the moment those people who are jumping on those legitimate complaints is such a like crafted way of phrasing that. I almost wonder if that was sort of I shouldn't say scripted, but like pre-written bullet point for addressing this topic, because it absolutely is like diplomatic with a precise bit of language, where you're acknowledging there are legitimate complaints, but you're not overstepping in the other direction either. You're not really admitting as much fault as you could, but you're also, you know, giving a little and getting some.
Like a bunch of people that wouldn't have otherwise played the game are playing the game, and like that's awesome. And like we're giving them this new hobby that they can love and be excited about. And like
Jobert, it's not true actually. Diablo 4 is also on Steam. That was true for a couple of months, but they did add Diablo 4 now.
You know, we're well past that launch window, and I think everyone now is just sort of like, yeah, Steam players are part of Overwatch. It's great, which to me is a huge win.
Yeah, that is awesome. I think that's probably exactly what you would want from a Steam launch. And I think, as they say, you know, hate is not the opposite of love, but apathy, right? Apathy is. So the fact that people were out there hating on it, maybe, you know, I'm sure it was very difficult, and my heart goes out to developers who have to deal with that. But, you know, the fact that people were so motivated that they had to go in and leave reviews and stuff does tell you the cultural impact that Overwatch has had and perhaps still has in some people's minds. So.
That's actually a super deft way of summing that up in a way that wouldn't feel like as bittersweet or as potentially hurtful as it could have to touch on this topic. That, you know, love it or hate it, at least it's not apathy. He's right. Yeah, it's true. Silence would have been much worse in that situation. I'm not really in favor of dogpiling on developers either, and I don't really think that it's super practical to leave massive walls of mostly negative or just hugely negative comments. But many of them have legitimate complaints. So maybe I'm closer to Jared's opinion here than I thought I would be, but definitely don't harass game devs. But also, we're talking about a massive AAA company who has kind of gutted a game we loved for years to turn it into a cash cow, and there's not really any getting around that. So where rubber meets the road, there's going to be a bunch of angry people, and how do they express that anger? Hopefully in practical and responsible ways, but we're dealing with the internet here, so there's only so much you can say.
So
yeah,
that's
I'll always take frustration, like well-meaning frustration and like constructive criticism over apathy, right? Like if people stop caring, that's a problem. And if we stop caring about the critical feedback, that's also a problem. And so,
sure,
you know, it was the tough part of those reviews is so many of them were just like dogpiling, kind of like nonsense, but a lot of them were like legitimate, you know, concerns about the direction the game had taken and things people didn't like about it. And like, you know, it's you filter out sort of the noise, and then you get to the signal of.
I wish I could have asked him right there. So what are 2 points that you think are legitimate complaints that you've addressed in your recent, in the way that you've strategized going forward? How would you adjust based on things that you've seen that you consider legitimate complaints?
Like, all right, like, look, we still have things to work through here that are like, you can't tell players what to think. Like, you have to listen. So that's what we did.
Well, I mean, again, that leads nicely on, the idea of listening to players is kind of the elephant in the room, PvE, right? So this was obviously another, reflecting on 2023 for Overwatch, this was the thing, right? This was
the lowest point that the community had ever been, by far. This was 3 to 4 years of culminated expectations crushed in a single afternoon. And the hate was palpable. I don't think I've ever been as close to a game that went through such a tumultuous sequence of events as this.
It was meant to be the thing for Overwatch 2, and obviously it has been discussed to death, potentially. But for a lot of people, it was the thing that they were most excited about, and
legitimately the death knell to many people ever playing the game again when they heard this news, which was, even the way that it was delivered was insulting. At the end of let's talk about this Sigma event, and then just sort of drop that in 10 minutes and then shut off the stream and leave, like a mic drop, walk away, but with bad news. Yeah, there was a lot of angry stuff going around that day. The videos that came out of that on YouTube, holy hell. I don't know how they decided that was the appropriate way to deliver that news. But
in many
anyway.
ways, we've kind of gone dark on it since the launch, right? Like, we haven't really heard a lot about it from you guys. Yeah. I know you guys said that you're kind of listening to feedback, but it feels, at least from my POV, it feels like you've gone, okay, no, we're kind of putting that on the backseat. Maybe backseat is even too generous. Like, we're quite, we haven't even heard anything about it, right? And nothing mentioned on BlizzCon. So I think me and a lot of other people are looking at it and thinking, well, what is the plan here? Like, are we going to go back to like an Overwatch 1 type situation where it's just expect an archive here or there? Or is there still some bigger plan for the PvE?
See, I thought he was framing this for a minute, and I forgot this is where he goes with it, that we were going to talk about the moment they announced the cancellation of it and then get into that a bit. But he's asking directly, where is this going now? Now that we've had 3 missions dropped in the Invasion bundle with the $15 paywall for it, and the Sojourn skin locked into it and all. Where is the future of PvE now? Are you still looking forward to making more of it, or what? And I think this is one of the more dodgy sections when it comes to Jared's responses here, and I think I know why. I think they genuinely don't want to make any more PvE. It sold probably under their expectations, and they know this is not where the future of the game lies anyway, so all the time and investment it takes to make more of this is ultimately not worth bothering with. And so they've got to manage player expectations, and I think what they want to do is string us along until we just forget about it and then cancel any remaining future updates to it. Anyway, here you go.
I mean, yeah, I think I've talked about this a little bit, but just to say it, like, Overwatch 2 is not going to be the everything Overwatch game. Like, it just can't be. I think that what we learned from, the end of Overwatch 1 and trying to build it, and what the team learned from that time period, was that, like, they weren't really set up to be able to execute on that vision of, like, Overwatch 2 can be everything. It can be this, like, always on, frequently updated content machine that kicks out a bunch of great PvE stuff. Kind of.
I have to gently push back, Jobert. They never, even under Jeff Kaplan, they never said in any form that we would not pay for the PvE expansion. They had made one declaration, which is you will get all future heroes and maps as Overwatch 1 owners going forward. But they had always left it with a star, or sort of ambiguous, about whether or not there would be a fee for PvE. And I think the general consensus amongst the community was that there would probably be a one-time sort of like box price, as if we were buying another game, we were buying Overwatch 2 in a box. So maybe a $40 buy-in, and then we would have the campaign from there. But they never specifically said we would never have to pay for it. They said we would never have to buy the heroes or the maps. And they have actually done that. It's just you have to grind to level 45 in the battle pass, but the maps are free at least. So, yeah, they always just address the PvP side of that when they add actual declarations.
This like constant clip, while also then building and supporting a PvP game that's constantly updated. And like that wasn't going to work, and it's not going to work for us. And so, when we changed our approach, it was more about creating moments with PvE and with co-op gameplay in general, where it's like, you get that break from your like intense quick player comp matches, and you get to step back and either enjoy something that's just co-op with friends, or you get to learn more about the world, and you get these like cool hero interactions, and you get to learn more about the story. And that's really where we're leaning into PvE going forward. So if you look at our approach in the back half of the year to PvE, we did story missions and invasion, and then we've been trying a bunch of other stuff while we're working. So like hero mastery missions coming out is like, what if people got solo PvE experiences that they could dig into? Like, would they be into that? Like, what if we did stuff like Trials of Sanctuary, where you get to like get some power growth over the course of a match? Like,
just want to remind you, all of these various experiments that they're doing are essentially ways of showcasing skins that are being sold in the shop. They've turned all of these events into, you get to play as 4 heroes that we're selling $20 skins for. So that way you'll hopefully get attached to seeing the skin from a first-person perspective, and then when the event ends, or hopefully prior, because they probably won't sell them after that point, you'll buy them so you can keep that skin that you liked from the event. So in a way, I've kind of stopped caring about all events, because they've just turned every single aspect into a monetization aspect, and nothing feels like it has any heart to it. It's not really here for any reason other than to sell you things.
Would people be excited about that? So we have been trying different things with PvE, and that's going to be the theme going forward. Is we're going to keep experimenting. We'll try to find ways to move lore into those experiences, to give people who love the world and the story more of that to be excited about. But we also want to try these other things that are like smaller, replayable things, these like breaks from the action where you can have this very different experience.
You see the language he's using here is very he's trying very intentionally to move us away from the idea of campaigns and big releases and story missions, things that have consequence to them, or things that have high production value, and really trying to sell us on this whole, like, let's keep it small, let's keep it casual, let's keep it, contained, and managing our expectations here with every single sentence.
So that continues to be the approach going forward.
And that continues to be the approach going forward, meaning, as I said, I don't see a future where really PvE has any place. They may do one drop a year of some kind of, like, maybe one mission. But, weirdly, they haven't really even kept up offering the archives missions. I guess they feel outdated at this point, but I don't know. I just thought they could have made, like, an entry in the... where the campaign would be. They could have at least put all of the solo content together there, so that way you could play some single-player content of the offerings they've already put. But they're really big on FOMOing everything. Like, it's all got to be time-gated, and it's all got to be, seasonally themed. There's not really much that's being added to the game that you can just go back to whenever you want perpetually. Unless you bought the Invasion Bundle, in which case you can continue to access those 3 campaign missions that are about a half an hour long each. That one of which was done as far back as 2019, as far as we can tell, which actually had more features then, because they had these items that you could use that were sort of variable back in that showcase that Stylosa went to. And when the actual final version of that got released, those items weren't even there anymore. So they kind of simplified a thing that was done 4 years ago and then mostly kept it that way.
So is it fair to say then, because earlier on in the podcast we said that when it came to the PvP launch, you guys are learning and you're kind of now at this point where you're in your groove and you know what you want to do. It wasn't at launch Overwatch 2 wasn't like, you weren't like, this is what we're going to do. You're kind of learning and okay, you're now like, okay, we're in a groove. Now we can make the vision for the PvP game. Is it fair to say that, when you launched the PvE, you weren't, what you thought you were going to have wasn't what it ended up being, and now you're trying to learn again? Like, totally. Well, what do we want to do with the PvE?
I'm a little lost in that one. what you thought you were going to have, you had to learn again. Like the player base didn't receive the PvE missions the way that they were hoping, but they didn't receive them because they were based on information that wasn't entirely what panned out. But I guess he's just saying, like, every time we think we know what our attitude towards the game is going to be, it changes again. And so I don't think that players were necessarily that off base in being confused. It seems like they were internally confused about what they were offering. And so obviously that's going to get passed on to us by the time we have to buy something. And that's just been a problem with this game since the beginning. They really want to tell us what they're charging for things, but they don't want to tell us what they're giving us a lot of the time. And they'll throw out these very kind of vague plans about what's coming when, but it often ends up being just sort of vague promises that don't really culminate, as I said earlier. So I see these, single roadmap entries that are like, here's a new mission, but we don't have any idea what that means, or what that means in a bigger sense as far as how does this fit into their monetization plan, which is ultimately where it really needs to be started at the conversation. Anyway, keep going.
Totally, because it was like, think about this set of missions that had been built for a very different experience, right? It was what was shown at BlizzCon 2019 was not what we were going to be able to deliver.
But they still sold the game on that premise for 6 months. They still sold the Watchpoint pack for $40 as if that was the plan going forward. They had an appeal that's like, hey, you love Overwatch? Come buy this set of skins for this price, and you're going to be in on the first thing. And so, I don't know. I think it was probably never said explicitly, but a lot of people had it in their heads that if you bought this pack, it was somehow going to give you some maybe reward down the line that you supported the game early on. But that's probably a silly thing to think. It just really they didn't manage any of this well for a whole year going into the release of the game. And the damage control was insufficient, and the train kept going off the rails for nearly the whole year. I guess I should say 8 months of the year. And only now are we starting to get to a point where it feels like at least there's no more expectations to be let down. Which is not really something to be hyped about. It's like the train has run out of steam from crashing so hard.
And so when we step back and looked at it, it's like, okay, then what is this going to be? So here's this form that we can put it out in. We'll try this approach to story missions, and we'll see if it works. And it worked in some regards, and it didn't work in other regards. Like it worked in that we were able to give people this cinematic, really exciting and interesting set of missions to play through. But then when you look at it in the context of a live game, it's like, well, you couldn't drop 3 of those a season. It just doesn't work. We wouldn't have we don't have a big enough team for that. We don't have.
So I mentioned earlier that Jared's kind of straw manning here when he says we couldn't drop 3 of those a season. Nobody expected you to drop 3 of them in a season. Could you drop 1 in a season? Could you drop 1 in 2 seasons? Could you drop 1 in 4 seasons? None of those are on the table. It's just we couldn't drop 3 in 1 season. So, you tell me, what could you do? But instead of offering that solution, we just go, that's all impossible. So there's obviously more behind that response than he's willing to explain here.
Enough development time to build up that set of missions for it, and so
also completely disingenuous. We didn't have enough development time. You literally had 3+ years, but we still don't even know what happened to all that time. That's weird to me to say that. As I said, the Rio mission was shown back in 2019, and they mostly left it exactly the way it was since 2019. So, unless that was sort of a hollow vertical slice of that mission, and somehow it wasn't actually running in real time the way that they explained it to be, and they had to, completely change it on the back end. So you made 2 missions in 3 years, and you're claiming you don't have enough development time. I don't get that. Please explain? But we'll never know. That whole thing was such a mess.
Those kinds of experiences I do think are important for Overwatch going forward. but like this idea that like, actually, we're going to be able to do that every season is
Again, we didn't ask for every season. You name the number of seasons that's reasonable based on the workload your team has bandwidth to handle. You're aware of that. You understand the inner workings of it. But instead of addressing it in a transparent way, you sort of just make up stuff and say it can't be done. That's not cool, and it doesn't help us understand your problem here. Good night, Rolf. They had shown a couple of previews of other missions that might be coming down the line. There was one specifically focused around Zenyatta. We just haven't seen anything more about that in a year, maybe 2 years. And I also want to draw attention to the fact that the team has, like, tripled or quadrupled in size since the original Overwatch, and they're barely able to put out enough to fill out a battle pass, and they also subcontract the souvenirs from another company, so they don't even have to make those polygon models for them. They release one map every other season, and they release a hero every other season. There's a lot of game modes, but they're all, as I said, shop skin things, and they release a lot of recolors. In fact, this season is the biggest season for recolors they've ever had. I believe there's over 10 recolors coming to the shop. And what I mean by recolors is they take a skin, they change the visuals of the skin, they don't change the mesh, which is the easiest way to redo a model to make it quote-unquote unique. And then after they do that, they charge $20 for it. So, I don't know, it kind of missed me with the, like, we don't have time thing when your team is bigger than it's ever been. And, like, you're still operating on the same release cadence as you were with Overwatch 1. I don't understand what that is. Like, how does that all work? And I've never understood it. And I've racked my brain to try to understand it better, but I just can't seem to get there. I don't know where the time has gone, where the workload has gone, how their team works in terms of efficiency, but they seem to be operating with many times the people, but many times less the output. And they won't explain why. I don't get it. I mean, keep in mind, too, Overwatch 2 launched with 3 heroes. We were saying for sure, based on the amount of time that's passed, they must have, like, 7 built up. No, it was 3. And then they go back to the same release cadence, roughly, of 3 heroes a year that they had for Overwatch 1. So I really genuinely believe between 2019 and 2022, or sometime early 2019 to the end of 2021, maybe the beginning of 2022, maybe nothing really had gotten done, or absolutely everything that had happened to build Overwatch 2 got scrapped. Maybe even multiple times, I don't know. But I simply can't figure out where those 2 years went in terms of output. I know COVID happened, and I understand they had a problematic workflow when it came to working from home. I've heard that on a number of occasions, but it still feels like that's still too much missing time to account for. Yeah, I'm really confused by this all, and Jared hasn't really helped elucidate much regarding all of this. But I guess, that would not have been something I would have expected him to talk about.
It's not realistic. And so, yeah, when we went into Invasion, it was basically we were taking something that had been built for a different purpose and applying it in this different way as part of the live game, and then seeing what happened. And we learned a bunch from it. And so,
we were taking something for Invasion that was built for a different purpose. I kind of don't know what he means by that. Is he saying the PvE missions weren't meant to be PvE missions? Or, like, I know there were hero missions, and those weren't that. So what were those missions that were released, if not the things they were building already for the release of the Overwatch 2 campaign? I just don't know. Like, that feels like a missing bit of information there.
So, I would love for us to do more stuff like that in the future.
Right.
But we also want to mix it up a little bit and see if we can find something that people like absolutely love and want to like constantly keep playing.
Yeah, well, I understand they found the idea to be not viable for long-term play. And that's why we were mourning the loss of those skill trees, which I still don't really understand what the problem was there either. They said it was simply not viable, not possible for them to commit to creating skill trees for every hero. And why? Again, I don't really think they understood, or they have to have. I'm not trying to make them sound like idiots here. They obviously would understand what it takes to make a skill tree, and they wanted to commit to it at one point, but then they changed their mind. But skill trees don't necessarily have to be 100 things that all change the animations of the character. They could be, stack 5 points into this one and something happens. But I just don't... It's too fractured, I guess. There's just too much for them to do.
Within the scope of what we can do as a team.
Right, and I think, you already said you're kind of trying to engage various parts of the audience with your collaborations, and I think with the PvE, while you've said that you don't want Overwatch necessarily to be a catch-all game for everyone, there is a large section of people who do like the PvE a lot, and,
He specifically said, yeah, I don't want this game to be like Fortnite in that it's not a catch-all for everybody, but then he also said, but we want to keep trying different collaborations to try and see which, demographic segments we can capitalize on. I'm putting words in his mouth there. He didn't say that specifically like that, but if Doomfist One Punch Man didn't capture an anime fan sub segment of our audience, then we would try one that would eventually capture that segment. So he does want it to be a catch-all in that he wants to milk those fans of those things. Just got to find what they are. And so far, I'd say they're 4 for 4 on that. Because turns out Overwatch fans pretty much just want anything. Which is funny because they also kind of also hate everything too. But they also want everything, and they're willing to... They're genuinely willing to spend $50 to spite other people. I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I've had multiple people say it to me before that, like, just because you don't want me to buy these skins, I will now buy them because I'm so rich and I can flaunt my money and, fuck you, get a job. That kind of thing. That's who they want to cash in on, I guess.
I will mention, because I was asked this a lot, that, like, for example, the PvE doesn't progress the battle pass very much anymore. So I think a lot of the PvE players feel a bit neglected, like they kind of really had their hopes up and now they're starved a little bit. So
yeah, the PvE players can't even find matches because, like, nobody's playing those 3 missions anymore, and why would they? There's no reason to play them again. I know a lot of people just watch them on YouTube because they wanted to see the cutscenes. Yeah, it turns out if, like, you try to make something infinitely replayable and say it's not possible, that what you do make is not going to be infinitely replayable, and that's the way that goes. But you can at least bring a group of friends in, so there is that. It's not like it's a lost cause. You could meet up on Discord and say, let's do the PvE missions together, whatever. I haven't bought that pack. I haven't played the PvE missions. If I'm not interested, I think a lot of people didn't buy them.
What could you say to maybe, like, reassure them?
There's nothing that I, as a developer, I think can say to reassure people, right? Like, I think ultimately we have to deliver stuff that...
Funny, though, because you say a lot. I mean, as, a new commitment to transparency, you seem to want to say things. But yeah, we do seem to find ourselves at this impasse constantly where you say things and then the things that happen aren't quite the same as the things you said. So, you're right, but here we are saying things
that they enjoy. And so what I will say is when we put out things like event missions, or, like, we did Underworld as part of the PvE release, the response to that was actually really good. The week over week we saw people come back and play it when the modifiers changed. Like, that was an area where we learned on something that was much more realistic to build and actually, like, provided, I think, some pretty good replay value there for people that then also progress the pass. And so
I have to say, again, I know I'm getting to be very negative at this point, and I probably need to rein it in a little bit, but just to be real about it, a lot of what those PvE or, like, special event missions that they come up with ultimately culminate in, and I don't mean the archives ones, but, like, the little shop skin preview ones, they're kind of like what you'd get if you gave somebody with a decent amount of knowledge a few days with the workshop to just kind of code up some little, fun little completely disposable mini game. They're not anything you would expect someone to play for hours. And nor do they treat them that way in the challenges. They expect you to play them like 3 times, maybe. But it's really strange to me that with the team of hundreds that he mentioned, he literally said team of hundreds, that this is as much as they can really come up with in terms of ambition, that we can kind of make a workshop mode that's like publicly accessible as a mainstream offering. Isn't that weird? Aren't they like a AAA massive company with, you know, industry leaders? And I know they're capable of more than that, is why I'm saying it. I know they are. They've demonstrated it in small ways, but maybe not this team as much. It's really weird to me. I can't get my head around it.
That was one that we learned from. What I want is for people who come in to play the game to get that value out of the time that they spend. And so where we have an area where it's like, hey, I just spent 3 hours playing this thing and I basically got no past progress for it. That's something that we do need to improve and like fix going forward. So I want those people to feel confident that we're not going to make them feel like their time is wasted, for sure, because I know that that's been a frustration.
Awesome.
But we have to try some different stuff there and just see, like,
you know, now that you mention it, maybe there was actually some event that a workshop modder had maybe contributed toward or made. I can't remember, though. I feel like that did come up. Maybe I'll think of it.
You know, learn from the stuff that worked and take from the stuff that didn't work and you know, avoid some of those things again.
Right. That's totally cool. Glad to hear you guys are kind of noting these problems. And speaking of like a sort of core part of the community that kind of maybe hasn't had too much discussion recently, is like the workshop side of things. Like, I don't know if this is a question you can really answer, but you mentioned Lego Fortnite earlier, and you know, I think the whole game industry is looking at these kind of things as like, wow, this is incredible what people are doing. Yeah. And the Overwatch workshop was kind of like the starter wheels of that kind of a project. But is there any idea of something bigger, like a full-on map editor or like a creative mode that really lets people dive deeper with the assets that are in Overwatch to make new things for themselves?
Not to that extent. Like, Lego Fortnite is like absolutely incredible.
Not only not to that extent, not at all is the answer. But
in terms of like what it is and the scope that it has, like it is a big experience. So for us, I think what we would want to focus on with Workshop going forward is, you know, we were able to do a really cool event that was with the mode created by a creator earlier this year.
Yeah, okay, he does mention it, which is why I had that in my head. There was an event that that a creator contributed toward that they ended up using as one of the skin shop showcase games.
The Demon Lord mode that we did.
Demon Lord.
5. And like building on the tool set that we have. So
they're not even using their internal resources to make that mode, but saying they don't have the bandwidth to create bigger, more ambitious things. Like, what on earth?
We can enable people to make more stuff like that like is bigger and more interesting and like potentially is like integrated as a direct part of our events or like our live game.
He's just saying now, it'd be cool if you guys could just make the game for us and we'll just ask for money. Could you just like make the game and we'll just get paid? Thanks, Jared.
Is sort of the thing that I would want to like get better at first. Overwatch, the workshop in Overwatch has always been like, you know, really good for people who are like hyper invested in getting into the details. But it's not.
I know that's a cynical read, but it's actually not that far off of what is really being said here.
Particularly friendly to people who you know haven't used that kind of stuff before, and also, you know, it has some gaps. There's bugs in it and things like that. And so when I think about where I'd want us to go with that, it's not to the level of like, you know, have a full map editor where you can do scenarios and scripting and all that kind of stuff, like some other games have done.
Again, hyperbole. Nobody asked for a map editor where you can do scripting. What about a map editor where you can move assets around at all? Because the workshop, they've come up with some really creative ways to try and approximate what that might look like or be without actually any of the things working. So what they've done is they allow you to use these like electric VFX nodes where you can basically place orbs in various places, and if you connect them as if they were a polygon, you can have them like become a solid collision mesh. And so you can make ramps and stuff, or you could like make a platform, but obviously you can't like move around assets properly. You can't just take a piece of wall and move it somewhere else. None of that's on the table. So when we say, could you make a map editor, instead of asking and then being responded to with, yes, maybe that's something we could do, they go, no, because we can't make one with all kinds of extra bells and whistles like scripting and here, all these other things that we didn't ask for. That's changing what was asked of you in the first place, so you can deliver us a no, but not the question we asked.
For me, it's like the baby step there first is just make it more stable, robust, like make it something that we can like consistently use and even use to build big events for the game.
So the workshop to him is a level editor they can use to build events for the game? That's not what that's meant for. The workshop's supposed to be the community side, where we get to do silly toy box stuff and have fun messing around with it. It's not meant to be a developer-facing tool. What? Did I just hear him wrong, or did he just not understand what workshop is? Not to mention, it didn't even work for months. It was disabled until, I don't know, 3-4 months after the thing released. It was a developer-facing tool initially, but it isn't now, and it hasn't been for years. I want to say Workshop came out in 2018. It was like 2 years after the game came out, maybe 3. But they have their own tools. Why do they need the Workshop? Thanks very much, Tevo, for the 111 months. Thank you. Maybe he just means it's what they use, and that's what we get. I thought they would use their own tools rather than the Workshop. SVB looks done. He's like, right, no Workshop then.
If it goes anywhere
that
from
was just a
there,
bad still, I'm joking.
It'll be based purely on like demand or need, right? Because say we have 15 people spend a year just making
It'll be based purely on need or demand.
Workshop like the greatest thing ever, and then 2% of the community engages with it. I'm like, that probably wasn't the right way to spend that time.
But if you don't allocate resources to making it at least reasonably good, why would people spend their time on it? You're again putting the cart before the horse here. You're deciding something is a waste of time at the outset, rather than allocating resources for it and hoping maybe it could catch on down the road. So that sounds like you're desiring to steer it into a ditch and then blaming it for having gone in the ditch.
And so, yeah, well, it'll be a little bit more iterative. It'll be a little bit, smaller in scope. And then if there's a bunch of demand, we'll build on it from there.
I hear we're not going to do anything on the Workshop, honestly. Like, we're probably just not going to do anything with it at all.
All right, so what I'm hearing is workshoppers, you need to start getting the community rallied. You need to start signing some petitions or something, get everyone to play all your workshop modes and create cool stuff.
And to be fair,
I wish I could be as optimistic as SVB is
yeah,
there.
like I want to bring more of that stuff into the game, and like
again, re-emphasizing, I want to bring things you made into the game so we can monetize it, and you don't get any share of that.
Our events, and like I want to be able to feature creators who like really understand and make rad stuff in Workshop. I want to make them kind of front and center.
But you won't give them the tools to make things in Workshop.
Awesome. And shout out to Cactus Puppy, by the way, who made the Demon Lord. Big
Yes.
And the whole Workshop community. I've kind of engaged with them a little bit, not as much as I would have liked.
By the way, this is why I would never be able to actually do an interview with one of these, with one of the people working there, because obviously I'm too hostile about all this stuff, and I'm not a good fit for this sort of thing. SVB is much more rational and even-keeled. I have to seize on every single stupid thing that I hear, and I can't let it go. So, I know. Apologies if it's too abrasive, but this is the way I am, unfortunately.
But they're really dedicated, and they're really, passionate about Overwatch, so it's awesome to see. So my pretty much second last question, then the final one will just be, a sort of summary for 2024, as it were. But what is the vision outside of Overwatch, like outside of the game? What is the vision for like the franchise of Overwatch? Like, is there anything that you're kind of keeping an eye on of like, okay, well, we want to think about, people obviously, I won't even mention the Netflix show, I won't go say the full name, utter it. But, there's other things that people can do. There's like spin-offs and whatnot. So is there any ideas there?
I mean, I think my boss is probably watching. So, in the interest of not getting fired, what I will say is very vague, but it's true. So, what I will say about it is, uh, we love Overwatch, not just the game Overwatch 2, but like Overwatch as a franchise. Overwatch, the possibility space for what it could be, right? Like seeing the response.
You have to keep in mind now, balancing this against canceling PvE and trying to work on expanding the game. So PvE is gone. Overwatch League is kind of mostly gone. It'll probably come back in some way, but it's kind of gone. The idea of expanding the game or asking about where is the future going, all I can get from their actions has been, we are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking until we find a stable way to release enough content that we can get through a year. So to me, I don't think there is an answer to this, but
So the like short anime episodes that we did earlier in the year was really great, and like it's you never want people to be disappointed, but what you want is for people to be like, God, why can't there just be more of that? Like, why can't I get more and more? Why couldn't this be a full series of like 30-minute shows or whatever? Like, that's the kind of response that we want to see, that helps us understand that there is a demand for that stuff out there, and it's not just us being excited about these ideas of like, hey, what if we did this, or what if we tried that?
and yet the community was unbelievably strong-minded about that PvE was what they wanted. And you would think there would be an extreme amount of demand for that thing, but it was impossible. So it strikes me as really false that you would want to build up another potential hype moment toward any other thing at all after we've now gone through that cycle of backing away, right? That just seems so weird to me. PvE was the thing that allows them, that was the key that allows them to move forward into an even larger space. We went from building up and building up to shutting down almost entirely. So there is no next step because we've dropped off the cliff now.
So what I can say is we have a bunch of really great ideas. There's a bunch of stuff that we want to do and are looking into doing, and it's a question of like, which of those things become real and when do they see the light of day. But like, I think it's really clear that not only do we want to make more stuff in the world of Overwatch, but the community wants more stuff in the world of Overwatch.
Is it really clear?
Like, it would be my honor to be able to deliver a bunch of those things to them. So stay tuned, and as we can actually talk about stuff, we will.
Did Sojourn ever get a cinematic?
There's a lot of
can't
amazing
remember.
things we could
Maybe?
do with a franchise this good.
I agree. There's like so much potential. I think that's how everyone who loves Overwatch feels. It's just like amazing characters, amazing, vibrant world that people really enjoy participating in. So I think
It's weird how you have to like track every form of media to try and find if there's like any new lore or world building around a certain character coming out. Like, some of them will be in a comic, and some of them will be on a YouTube video, and some of them will be on a trailer, and sometimes they'll release a full cinematic, and none of it is like generally in the game. And I know this was something they were meaning to change. There's supposed to be sort of a lore codex. I don't know if that was added with the Invasion bundle. I kind of forgot if that was in there or not, because I didn't buy it. But I thought that was supposed to be sort of their compendium for lore in one place in the game. And that would have actually kind of solved that problem if they did add that. Does anyone here know? Did you buy the Invasion bundle? Did you see if there's a lore codex somewhere? I don't have access to that.
anything could be done and everything could be done. Actually, before I ask my just 2024 really quick answer, console, because I know my console homies, they're always feeling like, they're a bit neglected. Any word on console, especially like zimming and issues like that? Like any note to the...
Zimming, by the way, X-aim, it's the ability to play mouse and keyboard on console, which gives you an unbelievable advantage over people trying to snipe you with a controller. As you can imagine, your ability to have dexterity with a mouse and keyboard is leaps and bounds better than a controller, generally speaking. I know there's some really good, talented players on controller, but like, it's going to give you an advantage in most cases, so it's a problem when people all use that, and they do on console.
Console community.
Yeah, console is huge in Overwatch, and actually it's grown in Overwatch 2 to be a massive part of the player base, right? So like, one of the things that's interesting about development teams that have been together for a long time is they build their habits, and like Overwatch started as very much a PC thing, right, and then grew over time to be more and more console focused, and so Over the past year, one of the things we started to do, and there hasn't been a ton of this that is manifested in the game yet. I mean, like dead zone settings and stuff have come out, but like we haven't done as much for console players, or we haven't released as much for console players as we want to and are working on. So I've talked about on Twitter or whatever, like the fact that we are working on Zim. We have plans there. The thing where you're talking about like anti-cheat stuff is like you really can't say a ton about it publicly, otherwise the people who are developing those things will then know what you're doing, and then they will be ready to like react. So like
But you could say that you have a general time frame, right? I don't know that would really change much, or would it? Maybe it would. I don't know.
our focus is, we know where the problems are. I think there's two big categories. One is, are people using devices like Zim for console, and how do we prevent that where possible, knowing that it is a really tricky challenge, trickier than even I knew before I started looking into it. And how do we make the game like a great experience on console? There's a couple of things that I think are like really focus worthy for us. One is we still occasionally release bugs that are like pretty game breaking. Like there's a PS5 menu bug that went out 2 weeks ago. I think it was.
Yeah, it reduced the frame rate of the game for PS5 players to like 15. It was basically unplayable, and it was in the game, I'd say, active for about 2-3 days or so. Maybe I'm a little off. It might have been 4 days, but I don't know. It was not great, and obviously that was really frustrating for people because they basically couldn't play at all for a bit. They did fix it, but like as Jared's about to say, that really shouldn't have gone out in the first place.
Time means nothing to me anymore. But like recently, that was really bad, and we should have caught. We didn't catch. We introduced it kind of unknowingly, and then the team responded really quickly and fixed it. But like as developers, we have to be better about like validating our own stuff, and making sure that when we're implementing something, we're thinking more broadly about all the things that could be impacted by it, so that we are consistently delivering a good experience. The other is usability on console. Like the game wasn't initially created to be like used on a controller, right? And so you still see weird little vestiges of that in the game that are like confusing or baffling, or why do I have to hit this button 15 times to get to the menu thing that I want? Like there's just a bunch of little stuff like that, right? And
This still strikes me as really odd because obviously they would know this having released it on console already. And the fact that it was deprioritized to such an extent is quite frustrating, right? I mean, that's pretty basic stuff that you'd want to get right. And I don't know about you, but I feel like the UI of Overwatch 2 is substantially worse compared to the UI in 1. Everything feels like it takes more button presses, is more convoluted and confusing to move around in. Just in general, the UI just feels like a downgrade. Not to mention, like, the medals and things just kind of look worse or more superficial, I guess you could say. It doesn't feel like it's got the same heart to it, but that's a very strange read, perhaps. And so this kind of stuff, like, for them to still be fiddling around with, like, console, you have to press something 15 times, or it looks like it wasn't designed for console, like, was this a surprise to you that you were going to release on console? I mean, it was such a big, important thing to release free-to-play everywhere at the same time, but it just goes to show even more that, obviously, the time that they were allotted to make those EXEs was not enough, and that they were really crunching pretty hard on a deadline there. Well, I don't know if they were crunching, but they were definitely on a hard deadline, and, they still haven't fixed it a year past the release.
So, like, we've just got to get better about those things. So there's making sure that we're delivering higher quality on console consistently, not introducing bugs that are unique to console.
I'm not sure what the team structure is actually for console and PC.
And also the sort of like just making usability as good as it can possibly be, so that console players feel like it's like streamlined. Like getting into a game with friends on console is way harder than it should be. It is not easy today, right? And that's like a little basic thing that we just need to be better about. So the team already has a bunch of ideas for this that they're either working on or will be working on in the future, so that those players understand that we care about them as much as we really do.
Hearing him be so emphatic about that point makes you just go like, why haven't you done it already? But I mean, I know why you haven't, because there's a million things to do, and it's like you got to only put your attention at one thing at a time. But at the same time, you've got a team of hundreds, right? Like, and it's been a year since this is released, over a year. Seems pretty bad to like be this far behind.
That's really awesome to hear. I think the console community, they just genuinely feel a bit like, well, we're second tier, they don't really care. So it's really awesome to hear that there's all these issues that you've addressed, you're thinking about them, you're working on them. And I know you personally as well, Jared, I know you make a point to go and play on like different consoles, so you get the experience of like what it's like. So that's something that hopefully gives you a bit of comfort, console gamers, that especially Jared and many members of the team, I'm sure, are actually like actively looking for these problems. So
yeah, we have a bunch of people who are like primary console players. I actually primarily play on PC, but I try to every week at least play a bit on my PlayStation and my Xbox, just to make sure I like understand the experience there.
Awesome.
I'm not the only one.
That's really, really cool to hear. Okay, final question then. I know I've taken the allotted time, but final question is just basically, what can we expect for 2024? Like, is there anything you can tell us, or maybe just big picture ideas of like, okay, well, 2024, we're going to ramp it up. I imagine you can't talk about like Microsoft, obviously, but what is the vision for 2024?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're going to release more at the beginning of the year, but like just to give you something here, like 2024, like development takes longer than you would think. I think often the community is like, we'll release something and they'll be like, this is in response to something that happened a week ago, and I'm like, this has been in development for like 6 months or more. Lead times are long, and so a lot of what's coming out next year is the stuff that we've been excited to change or add or fix from this year. And so
that cadence, by the way, is really useful to keep in mind when he says stuff that they release or they want to release coming up is stuff they did last year. If you're going back and analyzing through the timeline of how this all happened, it all kind of makes sense with regard to what I said earlier, that it just feels like there's about 2 or 3 years that are just gone. It really feels like everything started being developed about a year prior to the launch. So like end of 2021 or something like that, or maybe middle of 2021, something like that. So yeah, that's probably been the cadence then and still remains to be now.
Going into season 9, I think you'll see kind of the beginning of that, where it's our major comp rework, and I believe is a significantly better experience than what we have today.
Why did it take till now though? Like, why didn't you realize this thing you were setting up then wasn't good? I mean, I guess you did, but it takes this long to build it, but like, why did it initially release in such a stupid way, is what I'm saying. Nobody wanted it to be the way it was. Just you guys.
Also know that we're going to learn a bunch of stuff that we have to adapt to from that once we release it. So you can look forward to a bunch of big reworked systems like competitive and others. You can look forward to a bunch more interesting collaborations if that's the thing that you're excited about. That might go significantly broader than what we've done to date, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's going to be like freaking Star Wars Hammond. They're going to make Hammond into BB-8. And he's going to roll around and make droid sounds, right? That's what it's going to be. And then they're going to make a Star Wars character as the next hero. I don't know, just guessing.
And then we have a bunch of really interesting gameplay stuff lined up. Like, we could spend a ton of time on like event modes and temporary stuff that people play for 2 weeks. But like ultimately, we have to find a good balance between those things which add variety and are really exciting in the moment, and balance those against like constantly making the core game better and different. And I think that that's like so critical for a game like ours. And so another thing you can expect to see next year is a lot more experimentation with the core game itself. And actually we'll be talking about that stuff pretty soon, because there's a lot that we want to do, and we've seen big improvements from things like group respawn and stuff like that. The lever penalties have been another one of those. So
again, I think he's hinting at the pick ban phase and potentially hero swap tokens that I mentioned earlier. I kind of feel like that's all that's coming down the line from what I've been able to gather reading between the lines here. It's just those are the big innovations, reworking comp, and many collaborations with other things that they're going to rake money in from. And I guess whatever they're going to do to the battle pass. There is one thing they didn't touch on, I don't think at all here, and that's the question of going forward. They've mentioned from Season 9, I think either Season 9 or Season 10, I guess. I'm not sure which. They're going to disassociate the mythic reward at the end of the battle pass with that season. So you essentially will be able to choose a mythic if you had missed one in prior seasons. And And I think that's probably a nice step in the right direction. What would be better, though, is if they stop FOMO gating the entire pass and just allow you to buy the pass and own the pass. So that way you can work on it whenever you want and swap to a different one if you feel like you want to work towards something else. And the reason that would be really helpful is because you're actually establishing a backlog of your own ability to have value in the game. So if you finish a season, you don't just have to wait until the end of the season. You can swap back to another battle pass that maybe you never finished and still make progress on something. You don't necessarily have dead time where there's just nothing left to do. Now, there's 80 levels to the battle pass, and then you get your mythic skin, right? So now you might be able to get a different, older mythic skin. But after the level 80 point, from 81 on to level 200, you're rewarded with, I think it's 7 or 8 titles, 8 probably, which are just text, just little bits of text that are usually not very cool or interesting. And you just got this massive text bank somewhere in your customized tab, which I always forget how you get to because the UI is not that great. And that's getting bigger and bigger. The list of like weapon charms and souvenirs and all of these various little bits and bobs, sprays and crap, all of those menus are becoming unwieldy and like very difficult to navigate because there's hundreds of items in them. All of this stuff just feels like fluff. The battle pass itself has very little actual content. It's got 8 skins in it, is mainly the basic reason people buy them. You'll occasionally get a victory pose that you like or something like that as well. But the vast majority of content is just fluff. And so what I'd really love to hear is how can you make all of that fluff a little bit better or interesting, or at the very least even give you more options. Because I genuinely don't need any more sprays. I don't really need any more titles. I don't really need any more player icons. I've got enough souvenirs. I really have enough. But that's kind of the thing you're buying for your battle pass when you buy it. Anyway, I kind of forgot what I was talking about as a tangent from, but here.
So we have a bunch of cool ideas for just ways that we can mix up the core game that'll make it significantly better. So like next year, if you look back at the end of next year, you know, when we're doing this again in 12 months, and we talk about the difference between 2024.
Yeah, there's one new ability or new thing that they've now allowed us to get, or will soon allow us to get. I'm not really sure where we stand with this, but they've added weapon skins now, which you would think would have been a thing from ages back. But they've released 3 hard light weapon skins. There's one for Reinhardt, one for Mercy, and one for Reaper. When they were first shown, it looked like they were going to cost $12 a piece, or there was a bundle. I want to say it was $25 or $30. I don't remember which. And that allows you to equip that skin on any other skin. So essentially your weapons will look like hard light no matter what player skin you've got on. But only for those 3 heroes, because it's not like you're buying the hard light look for every hero. It's just for those 3 if you choose to buy them individually. But then later it kind of might have come out that maybe they're for comp points also, or I'm not sure if it's both or either. Remains to be seen. I'm sure we'll find out quite soon which or how they're managing that. They're also adding emerald weapon skins as a new seasonal or annual reward for comp points. So each year, as I understand it, will have its own gemstone. So the 2024 year will be emerald weapons that you'll be able to unlock, which it'll be a premium currency for playing comp games that is not comp points. When I say premium currency, though, I mean you unlock them by playing comp, not that you pay for them necessarily. I'm not sure if the weapon skins that I mentioned are paid for exclusively or not. So it's all very complicated, and honestly, asking people to understand all this crap is like, it's getting to be increasingly silly. It's reminding me of like when people wanted to buy a DS when I worked at GameStop, and they're like a dad or something, and they've got a kid that wants a DS, and they're like, yeah, can you just get me something to play this Pokemon game on? And I'm like, okay, you've got 65 choices. Let's go through them all for the next 2 hours. And the dad's just like, I don't want to hear about all this. I just need something so he could play Pokemon. I'm like, all right, I'll give you a DS Lite then, because that's probably enough. But there is no person on the other side of the counter to just explain this quickly and cut through all the crap. It's always got to be more crap.
In 2023, I hope it is the like 2023 was that beginning of the journey, and 2024 was like we were just full speed ahead, just sprinting as part of that race, and it should feel really really great.
Awesome. I mean, I personally, yeah, I'm very encouraged by a lot of the things you said, specifically about how it feels like the team have kind of worked into their groove, and you seem more sure about what you want and what you want to do. I can tell that just from talking to you as well.
And sorry, I didn't address your actual question there. There are cosmetics. The mythic skins do change the look of abilities and particle effects. Specifically, like the Hanzo skin, the mythic skin from last season, gives your dragons like a skeletal appearance. So you get like a different looking ult. It makes when you fire your weapon sound different. There's like voice lines that are slight or modified. You'll get a voice changer sound, like the Hanzo one has a deeper sounding voice. I don't know. It doesn't matter very much, but it's just they try to make them a little bit more kitted out in some way or another. There's no ability to just buy those things like piecemeal, though. You just get it in the mythic skin, and that's that.
Well, especially comparing our conversations last time, I felt a lot more tentative last time. You guys were obviously launching a game and unsure of things, but now you seem to have learned lessons, and you've kind of. I think one thing that we often forget is the community that so much of the team is new, right? Like or hasn't been working on Overwatch for that long. So you're learning
Ship
lessons,
of Theseus
we're learning
Overwatch.
lessons, and hopefully they're all kind of applied to make a better game, or you guys like to say at the end of your calls, make a great game.
Make a great game, yeah. I think we'll get there. You know what I mean? Like I really believe that the mixture of sort of like Overwatch development veterans, the new blood, people like me who've come in and been there for a relatively short period of time, I think we have a really good back and forth. And then when we add in all the community feedback that we get, I think we get a really well-rounded picture. We have a super solid core audience now that is like playing the game every single day. And so I feel like we're like where we need to be to like really then catapult forward. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Well,
is that what you aspire, though, to have like an audience that plays the game every single day? Is that healthy? I mean, I know obviously some people are going to do it no matter what, but I don't know. I guess it would be for engagement reasons. I just mean from like one human being to another. Is that where we should aspire to be? I would like to set the line in the sand regarding that stuff, that maybe engagement could leave a bit of room for life that isn't necessarily. I mean, he spoke himself about how he's got 2 kids and sometimes, you just don't have time. I do grant, though, the battle pass regarding, grinding it to max level is like, it's pretty attainable if you play the game reasonably often, but you don't have to play it every day. I just think that I wish we would kind of move that philosophy around a little bit, so the expectation is not that any particular game should be the thing you do every day for 8 hours or whatever. It's just a bit obsessive.
thank you so much for your time, Jared. I really appreciate you giving me this in-depth focus on all the things that are going on behind the scenes, and I appreciate your candor and speaking in things that I think a lot of other game developers might shy away from. So I always appreciate you kind of just leveling with me and kind of being honest and upfront, and I'm hopeful that the community will appreciate that as well. So thank you so much for your time. Is there anything you want to say before I let you get going?
I wish I would have thought I'd shout out to Team 4 for being incredible. I'm sure some of the folks on the team are watching right now, but like, just to say it's been a wild year, and I hope that you all get some rest over the holiday and get to take it easy and come back refreshed. And then also just shout out to the community, like to everyone who's creating content like you, to everyone who's playing the game day in and day out, even if they don't watch any content or see my ridiculous tweets or whatever. Like I just thank you to everybody who works on, who plays the game, who's part of this community, because it really is, it's special and like totally unique in my experience in games. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, shout out Team 4 and shout out to you guys in the community. Thank you, Jared, again for your time. I really appreciate having you here. And yeah, hopefully we'll touch base again, maybe sooner than 2024, but 2024, like the end of 2024, we'll see and reflect, and we'll compare our yearly chats of how Overwatch's coming along. We'll both be older and, well, hopefully more distinguished.
You can just check the gray in my beard compared to last year to see, kind of how it's been going for me.
How it's aging you. Kind of like when Obama was the president. He just like aged really fast. So we'll see if Jared, the toll takes on you. But thank you, Jared.
There's no way I'll be as dististingued as that. But yes, thank you very much. And thank you for having me.
I know you've got places to go. So thank you so much, man. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out.
All right, so that's that. I genuinely wonder if Jared had seen everything that I've just said here. Would any of what I said be news to him or be surprising at all? And I feel like probably not much, if anything, would be. But this is just sort of the way that things work, and I still felt like I should express some of these things as a sort of response to the fact that he was willing to come on and have these chats. I kind of want to see, as SVB said, where this will look next year. What things did we promise and what things did we deliver? Where did we land ultimately with some of these questions? But if I was to take any one thing away from all of this, it would be that their main central priority is collaborations. Things will probably get marginally better. I mean, I think the comp change next season is going to be a pretty big one, no matter what. There's not really, unless they just completely botch it somehow, I think that'll just be helpful for everyone. Adding more rewards to comp is probably nice as well. But I don't know, really, beyond that, if I'm seeing much to look forward to. I mean, there's going to be some new heroes, but I'm not really excited for another game mode that's going to get, like, 2 maps. Like, there's just not enough being added to the prior modes that have been added. Like, Flashpoint has 2 maps, Push has 3 maps, and then we're going to add another one? I mean, this is not from stuff they talked about at this interview. This is from the BlizzCon thing, where they revealed the next big things that are coming already. And that was already a month ago. So, I don't know. It's kind of just, it feels like a grind from a player perspective as well, wondering what to look forward to there's really going to be. And I'm not excited about more shop skins. I'm not excited about more things to be sold or more ads to show up in my game as I see it. And I know, again, you probably don't agree. But yeah, it's not really an optimistic look, even though the phrasing was optimistic. And I genuinely think that what you take away from these sort of things is never what's presented at face value. It takes a little bit of cynicism that has been quite earned over the last couple of years to really read at what probably is the truth between, what's said and what will be delivered. So yeah, I don't think probably anybody's super shocked, but I did at least want to go through all of that, and I think it was an interesting bit of insight, and sometimes maybe more honest than was intended. Accidental honesty occurred. What really would have shocked me in terms of generating goodwill would have been if they really came out with something that would really make a definitive change toward their monetization policy. Something that expresses confidence. Something that says, we don't have to rely on $20+ skins now. We're owned by Microsoft, and Microsoft has made a statement publicly that they don't necessarily feel the pressure to generate as much revenue. That's something that has been said essentially through sources. So I would have loved to see some confirmation of that. I was surprised to hear that in the first place, but maybe I shouldn't have ever even let myself wonder if that could have been possible, because as with everything, this is all here to generate money, and the greed, to the extent that it is greed, is pretty high. So, yeah, Microsoft or no, I think it's going to be kind of the same game. And I was initially, when I heard people saying, well, Microsoft bought them, everything's going to change. First, I was like, that's stupid. Like, obviously, Microsoft wants money as much as Activision does. That's not really going to make any difference. And then Microsoft sort of made statements that made me think otherwise. Well, not otherwise, but I thought maybe I could dream a little bit. And this has brought me back down again, so... yeah, that's my take, and I'm sticking to it for the moment. I hope it was relatively enjoyable, and thank you again to SVB for letting me recast that. And I hope that if you do watch this, my takes were not so cynical that they were obnoxious. I hope I qualified most of the things I said with some rationality, and again, hopefully explained my perspective in why that cynicism is so earned. Because I don't want to be the type of guy that's just like, shitting on devs for no reason, making up, I just want to be angry stuff. That's not really ever where I've come from. Hopefully that you can see that my rationale is I love the game, I want it to be better. I don't want to just be angry. And I think a lot of cynicism for the game boils down to who can out cynicism each other until we're all in some horrible cesspool of anger. I just want things to get better, but every time a chance for that to happen comes across, it sort of shrinks away. Do you think the shareholders are happy with that? With which thing? Sorry, I talked too much. With the acquisition, you mean? Yeah, probably. I don't think the acquisition should have... Oh, okay, you meant the presentation. Well, regarding the acquisition from Blizzard and Microsoft, I think the shareholders would be very happy with it. I don't think the acquisition should have ever been allowed to happen. I think it's a monopoly, and I don't know why they were able to make it go through. But shareholders about this presentation... Yeah, they'll probably be fine with it. All they really want to know is stability. They want someone who will find what makes the most money and stay the course on that thing, and it seems like Le Seraphim was the answer to that. So more of that, and on we go. I think that's the solution there. All right, so that's what we've got for today's stream. I am sorry if that was not what you wanted to watch tonight, but I just really thought this was worth touching on. I'll be back to normal gaming stuff tomorrow. I'll be back at 7 GMT as usual. Not sure what I'll play, but it'll be something fun, I'm sure. Thanks for watching. I hope you had a nice time. I'll catch you soon. Have a great night.